So let's go ahead and we've got a busy agenda, so let's go ahead and get right to the workshop.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor and Council and Planning Commission members. As you're all likely aware, the City of Sandy has a requirement to complete a housing production strategy by the end of this calendar year. And so we kicked off that work, quite a while ago with Echo Northwest, who did some foundational building blocks of that. Ended up severing that contract and moving over to FCS Group to complete the HPS. And been working with them for the last several months. The intent this evening is to kind of discuss what the HPS is, certain components of what need to be required in the HPS, a list of strategies that we can explore further. So I don't want to take up too much time with me blabbering. Kelly, anything you want to add? Or should we just turn it over?
I was just going to add, and I'm sure Tim will go into this in further detail, but we're really trying to focus the majority of the discussion tonight around potential strategies. As you'll probably recall, I think at least 4 or 5 of you. I think back in September, which I believe we linked in the staff report, there was a more exhaustive discussion of like the background analysis through the contextualized housing analysis. And we had this big discussion about that. What we're hoping to do tonight is to not really focus on all of that material. It has been looked at and modified slightly by the FCS group, by Tim Wood here to my left. And so it's in the packet. I believe it's Exhibit B in the packet. So if you do have questions around the contextualized housing needs analysis and why that led us to some of the strategies we're going to discuss tonight, that would be a good exhibit to look at. But just to remind everybody, there was a pretty lengthy discussion on that maybe 8-9 months ago. And I'm sure Tim would be happy to jump into any of those figures if anybody has questions around them.
Sure.
But my main point was just that tonight we're really going to focus on the 12 or 13 strategies that Tim will be presenting. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tim.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Thank you all for being here and taking time to talk. And thank you, Planning Commission, for being here too. As Kelly started mentioning, this document is really around strategies that can help Sandy's housing economy grow effectively and grow with the city's needs in mind. And tonight's a great place to start that because these strategies don't work unless we get good input from everyone here. We want this document to reflect the needs and the desires of this community. And so that's our intent. So real quick, we'll go through our agenda, which is pretty brief. I'll introduce the housing production strategy and we'll give you a little bit of background on where that comes from, what you've done so far. We'll really quickly touch on recent housing policy accomplishments that the city's had, lot to celebrate there. And then the meat of the discussion will be discussing our proposed strategies, getting your feedback and sort of figuring out ways to implement that in the final document. Making sure again that this policy, that this document reflects what the city needs. So quickly, just going to dive into this HPS background and introduction. So as you all know, the city recently adopted the housing capacity analysis. That's the first component of the statewide requirements for cities to plan around their housing economy. Typically, this document is forward-looking, gives you a sense for what you need to plan for over the next 20 years based on the population growth projection that's provided by the state. So that document shows cities anticipated to add 2,400 housing units over the next 20 years. Mostly single family detached, but a good mix, a little bit more multifamily, I think, than you have right now. Of course, the market is strong in this region. Just checked today, median home value in Sandy is $507,000. So if you're a property owner, good work. But of course, the elephant in the room is the moratorium on development in Sandy. The wastewater capacity issues that the city faces. And so really tough to have this forward-looking document in tension with that reality. And to further complicate things, cities are now required to pass what's called the housing production strategy, Essentially, it's a document, and you see on this slide here, the structure of the document, but really the meat of that document is the strategies to meet future housing needs. So that effect essentially is a list of strategies that the city is committing to sort of make its housing production more efficient, more inexpensive, and ideally more equitable. So it's a brand new sort of planning document that cities need to undertake. So we're sort of learning as things go. We've had a few years under our belts, and so it's gotten to be a more effective process. And there's a real strong bifurcation between good and bad HPSs, ones that are effective and ones that sit on a shelf. Yes.
So I was under the impression that after we moved on from the last consultants, that there was gonna be kind of a more accurate depiction of our situation. And I understand maybe the HCA, maybe you inherited that, and
Yes.
I don't know. But with, the assumptions that had to go along to get, the annual rate of growth of population and houses
Yes.
for 2,424 new dwellings is based on having no moratorium. And so I guess I would just ask you as staff, city manager and consultant, that's not a realistic look at really what we can do. So I don't want to kind of promise something that we all know we can't do. So how do we reconcile those
Mayor,
aspirations?
what
And I
was-
want to hear from these
what
guys.
is
if
that
you-
target date for that housing number? Wasn't it 2043?
Right,
It's
but
20,
it-
it's 20.
It's 20 years. Yeah,
Right,
so-
but it's also,
Yeah,
excuse
it's
me,
been 20.
excuse me, but, we could have 5 years where we don't have any additional ERUs handed to us.
I'm
So-
thinking 10 even.
Exactly, so worst case 10, whatever, so there's half the growth period, and so this is based on an average growth of 120 units a year, which is typically what we've done, anywhere between 80 and 130, maybe, I don't know, Kelly can correct me, but so now all of a sudden, we're gonna be, doing that with half the time frame. So I understand the time frame is long, but we can't, obviously double up in the last 10 years.
Yeah, of
So-
course. Really quickly, yes, you're right. We did inherit this. We didn't write it, so it's just a document that we're gonna need to reference throughout this one. I think, and DLCD could correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I don't think that you're required to produce this number of units, and it sounds like you won't. Because of the circumstances that we're, and in fact, that happens constantly for a city that, let's say they lose their major employer, they're not going to hit their HCA target anymore. And there's no penalty for you to not hit that target.
At
This
this
is
time.
purely a snapshot. Yeah, well, yeah.
So these are aspirational goals at best. There's no objectives. There's not even a hard target on it that we have to meet.
Yes, the whole purpose of the HCA is to ensure that you have enough housing land inside of your urban growth boundary to meet what they assume would be the 20-year growth target. Now, that's a snapshot in time, right? So look at anyone's 5-year-old HCA, it's going to look probably a little silly. Some cities blow right past their target. Some cities never hit it. So I think the reason that we include that in this just is to identify and say, okay, hey, here's our background. Here's the document that is kind of coming in to this one. So again, we'll address that in the document,
Okay.
and
That's what I
try our
wanna
best
hear.
to give voice to
Yeah,
it. So I'll.
this is
I'll
kind
make
of very
But-
aspirational, given our existing conditions.
Right, but I assume though, because this is like like you said, a snapshot of where we would be, all things being equal. This is also a reference that would be used when we look at things like urban growth boundaries and whatnot, so that we're planning for the future, so that we have adequate land to be able to do these things.
Right.
So we're not
It's a-
short-sighted.
It's an analysis that cities undertake probably every 5 to 10 years, depending on their size and how fast they're growing.
Yeah, we have to by state law now undertake it every 8 years, which you are all familiar with. Previously, we didn't have that requirement. One thing I was gonna add, the only penalty I'm aware of right now because I have asked the state of Oregon this, is we could be put into what's called the Housing Acceleration Program
Mhm.
with that newly defined office, is it HAPO or something like that? And so I asked them, well, okay, so we're put into that, and they said, well, then there'd be more grant funds and different things available. And I was very clear with them that, well, that's fine and well, but that still wouldn't change the fact we wouldn't be able to produce housing during the moratorium. And they seem to acknowledge that, although I don't really know what that means, to be quite honest.
They probably don't yet either. So.
Fair point. I think
So I was gonna say, that's the only penalty I'm really aware of right now. I'm not aware of any like monetary penalty or any other sort of device or anything, or any other regulations that they would put on the city that would hamper this.
Well, I just want, when we finalize the document, I'd like to just have that clarified and.
Certainly.
circumstances. Thank
I
you.
think I'll just add one final point too, of the 12 sort of proposed strategies that we've outlined in Exhibit A, you'll notice that 5 of them are directly related to wastewater in one way or another, right? And so that's really like the theme of our document, is that we have an issue. That issue has to be addressed if we're going to come anywhere close to accomplishing the housing production that needs to happen in our community. So it's not falling to the wayside by any means. We're trying to highlight that as much as possible.
And if anything, we use this number to say, okay, you want us to produce this 2,400 units, impossible without assistance. And
Yep.
spoiler alert, we're going to ask the state for some grant funding in this document. So this is sort of helping to sort of juxtapose, there's demand. This is a strong housing market, but we need help. And we're not going to be able to do it without help. So I think it just kind of makes the call a little bit stronger as a result.
Great.
So real quickly, just want to highlight the sort of the turquoise box there. This is the structure of a report, typically an HPS introduction, discussion of housing policies. So that's again, the meat of the discussion there is just kind of giving details like time it will take to implement, housing impact, staff resources, pluses and minuses. So basically, what are the benefits of this strategy? What are the costs of this strategy? That kind of thing. Discussion of how strategies address, strategies to meet future needs. And that's really more like a measuring success against these strategies. The fair and equitable housing needs chapter, I'll write that. It's just basically it links the data in the housing, the contextualized housing needs analysis to the strategies. So we're just basically saying, okay, in this data, we're showing, hey, our renters are experiencing a high cost burden. So here's a strategy around trying to help produce more rental housing or something like that. So, and then the 2 appendices, contextualized housing needs analysis, which we've completed, and then the stakeholder engagement summary. So basically summarizing all the meetings that we're having with folks in the housing economy or with you all. So that's the structure of the document. So that's what we'll be producing for you. So now we're going to really quickly touch on recent housing accomplishments. And I'm kind of hoping staff could help me flesh this out, maybe give some highlights on this list of what's happened recently that the city should be proud of.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say to this is something else I'm also gonna be talking with DLCD about and making sure they completely understand. Several of these, in all honesty, a lot of other communities have not done in the state of Oregon yet. And so because they haven't done them, they can use those as strategies in their HPS and get credit for them. Whereas we kind of were ahead of the game in a lot of ways. For example, the clear and objective code audit, there's only a few Oregon communities our size or smaller that have completed that in the state of Oregon. The coordination with Ant Farm on homeless assistance and the creation of the community service officer position. Those are things that I know a lot of other communities are not proactively doing, or will probably be relying on their strategies within their HPS document to kind of do that work. And then obviously with investment or significant investment in our sanitary sewer system, significant investment in our transportation infrastructure. These are things that we're going to really be highlighting for them, that we're really gearing up and trying to be a community that is developing housing However, we are hamstrung by different things.
Yeah, that community service officer position is very unique and laudable. I'm very impressed by that because we've worked with dozens of communities and I haven't seen something like that, so kudos. So now let's talk about these strategies that we brought before you. And generally speaking, we try to organize these into these 7 categories you see in front of you. So zoning and code changes, reduction to regulatory impediments. So basically trying to find ways to make housing production more efficient. Financial incentives, financial resources. So the difference there is financial incentives would be something that the city would, a signal that the city would give, whereas financial resources is probably more along the lines of gathering funds to help produce, and we'll get into what that means exactly. Tax exemption and abatement, one catch-all, land acquisition, lease and partnership, so a lot going on there. And then custom options and I think we all know where the custom options category is going to go for us. So let's skip to the next slide, which is the first set of 5 strategies, are B and Z category strategies. So this is our 5 strategies to talk and really highlight the wastewater capacity issue here. And we tried to order these in the list in which we expect them to be implemented, but maybe maybe there's some rejiggering to be done. So first is to pursue accommodations from the state to make science-based improvements to the NPDES permit, effectively looking to transition from a calendar to a stream flow-based analysis. Adopting the wastewater system facility plan amendment, which I believe is all of the alternatives that you're considering. Pursuing non-local funding matches for wastewater system, big one there, really important. Constructing the necessary wastewater conveyance infrastructure and improving the wastewater treatment plants. So 5 strategies right there. Of course, many of those are intertwined. We're probably not making B4 without B3. So, but again, to sort of emphasize the importance of this subject with respect to the housing capacity analysis, we're basically saying you're not getting to that 2,400 number without these things being implemented.
Do you think any of these, I mean, the financial resources, do any of these, especially B3, come under the D category?
It
and
could.
Get extra points for more than one?
It could. We certainly can make that argument. I think that that's probably a reasonable argument to be made. I think many of these sort of overlap with a lot of those categories, right? And that set of categories, we use that as consultants, and it's a state rubric, but it's not like we're getting points on all these different categories and the state, grades it somehow. It's a little more qualitative than quantitative, I think, from their perspective. But this, we're looking at a big funding gap, a $200 million funding gap. That's a burden that's too great for really any city to bear on its own. So this is sort of the part of this document where we're going to take the HPS requirement and make it a call to state officials to recognize the uniqueness of this situation and take it seriously and help the city and try and turn this requirement into something that the city can really use.
Would you say it's fair to say that when they're going through and when DLCD is going through and making, checking the box to make sure we're meeting all of the strategy categories on your previous slide, it's kind of an art as much as a science?
It's much more an art than a science. Yeah, in having DLCD review these documents, I found that process in general is definitely an art, but I think that we can strike a balance in this document of using it at once to be a messaging document and also to give DLCD the concessions that they may want to see from the city. So any comments on this set of strategies here? And there's ample opportunity for us to discuss at the end. Okay, we'll quickly move on then to, this is one strategy, category C and D, but this is becoming increasingly popular and I think setting this this function up prior to the end of the moratorium will set us up for success here. And that is a construction excise tax. So this is, I think this is from 2015 legislation, maybe 2016 legislation. And it allows cities to collect a percentage of the value of a building permit for residential and non-residential structures. There, as you can see on this graph, there are some parameters around which cities have to adhere for the way that they spend it. Although I'll note that this graph only shows the restrictions on residential construction excise tax. It differentiates, the state legislation does, between residential and non-residential. So non-residential is actually a lot more flexible for cities. But there's a lot of different ways that we can do this, but effectively, we're looking at a percentage-based fee on permit value. And as you can see, right, we're looking at 50% for development incentives for affordable housing. So that's pretty restrictive in the sense that it requires the city to use that funding to help along development for those making 80% or less of the area median income. And for this area of the state, that's $93,000. So you're basically helping folks that are making $93,000 or less. And usually the way that those look is that cities tend to collect this money over the course of several years, because in 1 year, you're probably not going to get enough to make a dent. But let's say.
Moratorium, we're not,
Exactly, yeah. But like,
it's gonna take a while.
we did a little back of the envelope math.
Yeah.
And assuming 100 dwelling units per year produced at an average price, permit value of $300,000, which I know is laughably low, but bear with me. And you know, a 1% tax, you're producing $300,000 a year. So over the course of, say, 5 years, you've got a good chunk of money to play with, and you can use that to buy down SDCs, to buy land that you could then give to a nonprofit to develop housing on. You could help existing residents retrofit their homes and make sure that they remain livable and habitable over time. There's a lot of different ways, and there's some great examples, especially from the city of Bend, which has been doing this for a long time, where they basically take the money and they put out an RFP for folks to provide the city with proposals, and the city chooses whether or not to use their resources on that. So a lot of potential here, and it sets the city up in a sort of a deal maker position, because a lot of these affordable housing developments tend to be really at the margins, right? We're barely making it happen. We're barely making it make sense for developers. So maybe that, you know, $1 million from the city out of a CET fund that you've accumulated over the course of quite a while has a major impact. So it's basically setting yourself up for the future to help you make deals and make stuff happen.
And that would be, that CET is totally managed within the city. It's not back to the state and back and forth.
Well, unfortunately, as you can see on the graph there, 15% does go to the Oregon Housing Community Services Down Payment Assistance Program. So the state does take a slice from the residential component, but the other 85% is all in city control. And I'll say, as a plug for the non-residential construction excise tax, which I'm a big fan of, it's all local. And in fact, 50% of it is unrestricted. So really, you could do anything you want with it. Of course, you know, from an ethical standpoint, you probably want to keep it in the housing realm, but it allows you to be pretty creative with the way that you use those funds. And you're not required to do 1%. You could do 0.5% if you'd like to. So there's a lot of flexibility in the way that you implement this. And
So we charge more so that we can charge less in the future.
sure, yeah, if you want to put it that way.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand the math.
I'd say this concept of a construction excise tax isn't unfamiliar to our local development community. We admit it, we charge and receive the school district's construction excise tax and then pass it on to them. So yeah, this isn't a new concept. Certainly would be different, you know, with what comes from those funds and what we could do with it. But the idea of, you know, an entity retaining those dollars to use for a future project is not foreign to people developing in our community. And the other thing I would add too is that including this as a strategy in the HPS is not saying that as of January 1st, we're implementing this program, right? We would be exploring the adoption of a CTE program, or CET?
Yeah,
Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Program, and then we'd be having work sessions with the council and discussing how we would implement that. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that there's a period of time where we can say we're going to be working on something, but it doesn't just come into effect right away. There's still a lot of discussion and analysis that needs to happen.
And that's a great point in general, in that none of these strategies, if you say, okay, yeah, Tim, go ahead and write the document, and that strategy sounds good. None of this commits you to implementing this thing full hog. I mean, everything will go through the typical process. And what I really like about the way that we're doing this is it gives you control from the outset and it continues local control throughout. So I think, and this is something that will play very well with the LCD.
Up until we get referred.
Yes.
I got a question.
Details. Yes.
And great slides, by the way. I looked through all of them earlier.
Thank you.
So hypothetically saying if somebody was gonna do like a $1 million house, $1 million housing development, maybe attractive houses or whatever, what would be the cap for this construction tax? How would that play into, a higher price? Well, how much would they be paying?
1%. Everybody pays 1%. So yeah, if you built a mansion and it was $1 million, the permit value is $1 million, then yeah, you're getting 10 grand out of that.
So that's different than like the 4% property tax we get on assessed value.
Correct.
This is the actual selling price.
Well, it's the permit value,
Permit value.
which,
What does that mean? I don't.
It's the value, so typically it's the value that we determine the value through the international codes table. It's the ICCB table. And that's per region. And then, so that actually our computer now does it for us, but we used to tabulate it ourselves. So they give us the square footage, how much it's gonna cost, and then we put all that information into the table and the table calculates how much it will be per square foot.
So is that higher or lower than the sales prices have been coming in at?
Well, it doesn't account for the land value or any like additional profit margin that they might be making. So it's definitely gonna be lower. Yeah,
So this is a tax paid by the developer, correct?
correct.
Okay, so remind me again, and you don't have to be exact. But if I go pull a complete permit package with SDCs in the city of Sandy right now to build a single family dwelling, what is it gonna cost me
As of May first,
Mhm.
or be prior to May first.
as of May 1st?
Okay, I'm just wanting to
Nope,
get very
I
specific.
appreciate it.
I think it's $66,000 right now,
Mhm.
all in.
And 1%, what would that value roughly be? 1% of that we would be adding on?
Probably 3,000 to 4,000 a house. So similar to one of our, well, I was gonna say similar to a lower SDC, probably closer to the school excise tax, to be honest.
Which is $1
A
per
dollar a square foot, and most houses are between, that we're seeing are 2,200 to 2,500, so.
So our 1% CET could look like an 8% bump in permanent pricing. 7 or 8%.
Yeah, somewhere around there, yeah. Yeah.
And the 1% would be collected at the time the permit was issued,
Correct.
so there's no deferment on that, so if
I
prices
mean, I
go
think
up.
that's when it's
Yeah.
collected, just like every other.
Okay.
PW.
So once they lock into that permit, that's the 1%. If they delay for 2 years, we can't just keep extending it out, so it would go up or down.
But as Tim also said, it doesn't have to be 1%. 1% is just the maximum the ORS allows you to do. So you could do 0.5%, and then all the numbers that we were just talking about would be half.
I mean, I'm okay with putting this in strategy, but this is gonna be a really hard sell for council because that 7 or 8% on top of where we're at right now is gonna be tough. And then the number of years we would have to bring in enough money to actually make a pot of money to push a development that wouldn't happen otherwise. It could be a long time to build that fund. I mean, I understand why we're putting it there because everyone else is, so we're gonna put it there, but yeah, I think it's. When it comes back to council for actual discussion, we need to look at what's that ROI, what point, how many years out would we actually have enough money to make a difference?
Yeah, I definitely agree.
I think Tim's point earlier is valid, though, that a lot of these affordable housing projects are. I mean, $10,000 could make or break those projects because so much of it's federally or state grant funded. And Tim, you could probably speak better to this than I could, but a small amount of money can make a big difference in getting someone that's developing affordable housing to actually get that project over the
I
finish
think
line.
that sounds good. I'd want to see that in writing, the numbers, how that is about.
So I just did some quick math, so take this as it is. But if the average house was 350,000 and we did a 1% at 121 dwelling units a year, so we're out of the moratorium. So it's times 20 years, it'd be $8.5 million basically
Over the course of.
over the course of 20 years with development going good.
Right, so
But also council has the ability, if somebody were to come in with an affordable housing project, we have the ability to waive SDCs and all sorts of other things to make that project affordable.
right, if $10,000 is all that's standing in the way of something that we want to do, that's.
There's easier ways to get it.
Right, right. I think it's more than 10. It's suspicion.
And just for clarification, you mentioned 8 or 9%,
So I'm just looking at the 4,000 or so additional cost of that 1% would add on to the 60,000 and come up with roughly a permit increase of about 7 or 8% for the permit itself. Because the 1% is on the value of the build, not.
Not on the overall.
So if the permit's 60,000, but the house is 300, then you're gonna add another 3,000 onto that 60,000. So that'd be the low end 5, if it's higher, you can 7 or 8%.
How common is the CET tax in cities similar to our size?
Surprisingly common. It's, of course, it started out with larger cities. But, certainly, we calculated it for Newport.
So it's not groundbreaking things. There are other cities that are using this tool to.
Can you
kind
name
of-
a few around here that use it
You
already?
know, I haven't helped anyone around here do it, which isn't to say that it's not happening, and I can go and look into that for you. I'll try and
I
make sure
just-
that you,
I did just pull up a list.
there you go.
So, Portland, Corvallis, Cannon Beach, Hood River, Newport, which you just mentioned, Milwaukee, Medford, Bend, Eugene. So that was as of a couple of years ago. This is an old document account, but so there probably is more by this point.
Yeah, especially since this is pretty common on these HPSs, so. But I'll try and find an exhaustive list for you guys, because I think that really would help, like, understanding
Yeah,
where,
thank you.
where else
Yeah,
that.
back to Don's point, I don't oppose putting it in there so that it's there, but
And part of the flexibility with this is, it could be a 1% up to $1,000 maximum. I mean, I think there's room to
Once
play
again,
with
yeah.
how this gets implemented, so.
Yeah, it's
And
for a
the-
later discussion.
The document due at the end of this year is just how we plan to go forward with the housing, not implementing those things like we've talked about. So it's
Correct.
just intent to follow the state's guidelines. And,
We
we're in a different situation.
That's spot
obviously.
on. We will have what's called a 4-year check-in, I believe is what they're calling. So after 4
That's
years,
yeah.
they're gonna come to me and say, what strategies have you done?
They
And
have to be,
I'm gonna have to show them some, so.
We're gonna
yeah.
show
good
all
faith,
the
right,
footnotes
not
in
just-
our
Right.
document that-
And we're gonna show them a lot of ditches
Except
and
for-
pipes that are going in.
All right, let's keep moving, and get a couple more of these down. So I think we're moving on to.
Trying to.
Oh.
No, that's still
Is
C.
that the wrong way?
No, that's just still
That's
C.
just- Yeah, I think. All
Let's get
right, so a handful here of zoning and code change strategies. Essentially allowing cottage clusters or other sorts of middle housing type developments in Sandy. Providing pre-approved plans that meet accessibility goals for disabled folks with the elderly, that kind of thing. Monitor and require registration for short-term rentals. And preserve and enhance existing manufactured home parks. So each of those obviously requires a little bit of unpacking. So the cottage cluster one, we're essentially just looking for other middle housing types that we can institutionalize here. That's another one where we're trying to make sure that DLC is satisfied with this document. that will go a long way to do it. And it doesn't have to be cottage cluster housing, could be more plexes, that kind of thing. Smaller lot sizes.
They're gonna
Sorry,
be looking for a housing choice.
they're gonna be looking for a housing choice component, yes,
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
so, in our code, it feels like everything, we've already got the whole gamut of apartments and condos and townhouses and duplexes. And I would assume we have triplexes and I assume that multifamily dwelling includes fourplexes, is that right?
And triplexes.
And
So you're
triplexes,
correct,
yeah.
it does include
And
that
so
already.
we already kind of include everything. And this cottage cluster is kind of just the latest little buzzword about allowing things. We've done the duplexes with the, basically detached duplexes, which defies the definition of a duplex, but there's not total agreement on that. And then, so they're allowed to build a detached duplex and then go back and split the lot. So even if you had a minimum lot size of 7,500, now you've got a lot size of 3,750 or whatever. And so I guess, and you could do that, with a 5,000, a medium square, 5,000 square foot lot, you can go in there and, subdivide a lot. And so with the cottage clusters, what that does is that treats it more like an apartment where it's all on one lot. And what's confusing to me or concerning to me mostly is that when, who's the landlord? Is the landlord living on site? Is anybody on site? So when your neighbor's dog is, not tied up or barking up, there's all these other issues about normally an apartment dweller or whatever would take to whoever's in charge of that. Now, if it's, when there's clear lot lines of whose side is what on or where the fence is or whatever, that's all kind of easy to do. And I could understand doing these cottage clusters in the high density zone that, because especially when you're talking about 1,000 to 1,200 square foot house, which seems like an ADU almost, but whatever. You're not talking base area, are you? That's not the footprint, that's the whole thing.
Yeah, no, that would not be
Right,
the base.
Yeah, and so I'm just trying to kind of understand, like, and then a lot of those, they don't want to require additional parking. And so then the whole who's parking where and who's in my spot and who do you go to? Because there's no landlord or they're out of state or whatever. So I don't want to kind of take something on that comes with a bunch of issues. I would rather see other places implement it and see what the fixes are for those issues and then consider it here. But at a minimum, I really wouldn't be considering it in anything but probably high density because that's, that's what you're talking about if you're talking about 1,000, 1,200 square foot place. And
Does the cottage clusters fall under an R2 or an R3 zoning? And is that something that pencils out in that zoning for a developer?
No,
for R3,
so,
there is no minimum lot size on R3. There is on R2,
so when,
5,000.
when we talked about this last, I just want to go back to our conversation, because we talked about cottage clusters a lot. I don't remember what context it was, maybe you can refresh my mind, Kelly, but we were very opposed to the cottage clusters, and it did not appear with the diagrams, the site layout example diagrams that we were given with, and I don't know if we were looking at it relative to our code or something else, I don't remember, but it didn't pencil out. You ended up with a lower density using a cottage cluster than you did with our traditional.
Yeah, so I'll just provide a few points of clarification. So, yes, the R3 does not have a minimum lot size right now, neither does the R2. The R1 has the 5,000 square feet and the SFR has the 7,500. Yeah, we talked about cottage clusters in context to the work session on mass timber a couple of months ago.
That's what it was, thank you.
And we fully recognize the council wasn't in love with the idea. But I think we had mentioned at that work session that we might bring it back as a potential strategy during this. So it's just being explored further. We could ask DLCD if there's not, if the majority of council agrees that cottage clusters is not, and the planning commission too, that it's not a strategy that everybody would be that hot on. I could start a conversation, and Tim too, with DLCD to see what other options are out there for housing choice. Because ultimately they have to approve the document.
What so you don't know what other, I mean, like I said, I don't know of anything else that exists.
There's not much, yeah, I agree.
And
with
so,
you.
I mean, I just feel like we have this whole huge choice of menu and then all these different zones, and so I just feel like, but I did read there's a document out there that talks about cottage clusters. And what they do is they then, they basically come back and say, well, you can't build that many houses on that lot. So now you have to kind of get rid of the setbacks and the, the required side setbacks and back setbacks and front setbacks and this and that. And, it's kind of like all of a sudden, that.
It's a
This-
really tough business case to make it work as a
Right.
developer.
Yeah,
Kathleen?
yeah, I'm sorry.
So please correct me if I'm wrong, but at 20,000 population, it becomes like a duplex where we're mandated to allow cottage clusters anyways. So I guess. with that-
25,000.
25, okay, thank you, 25. So could we set a parameter in there that's just in line with that rule that allows them at 25,000, so we don't have to allow them where we currently are at in our population?
Because it would be a state mandate, I doubt they would count that as a strategy, but we could, I think Tim and I, after tomorrow or the next day, can certainly reach out to the LCD and see what other options are out there. I do agree with the mayor, there's not gonna be many, I don't believe, so that's why we thought this might be an option. One more point of clarification I do wanna make before I forget. The majority of cottage clusters I'm aware of, there's one in like White Salmon, a couple in Bend, one over on the coast, maybe Lincoln City.
There's one in Happy Valley too.
That typically the land is owned by all of the owners, so it's an HOA, is typically how they're run. I'm not saying they're always done that way, but the ones I'm aware of, that's how they're done, so. The ownership's an HOA.
But you can't require that, right?
It's a good question,
Yeah,
probably not.
that's kind of the scary part.
But also just kind of going back to the excise tax. I mean, we could just leave this in here, right? Because we're looking at strategies. We're trying to debate something
Good
that
point.
we're not actually looking at making a zoning change.
Right.
This is just a strategy, so.
One clarification then, based on that comment, Lori, is the 25,000 threshold something that we have to require it in all zones or just in certain zones?
I think this has been a while since I read the legislation, but I believe how it reads is. Once a city in Oregon hits 25,000 population, anywhere there's a single family detached home allowed. Right now, we only have to allow duplexes, but once you hit 25,000, you have to allow duplexes, triplexes and fourplexes. Anywhere a single family home is allowed.
And cottage clusters.
And that could be, yeah, I don't remember that part of it, but yeah.
So one concern I have about leaving stuff like this in here. An excise tax, I don't think anybody's gonna come in here and lobby for us to tax them more. But I am concerned about this being a slippery slope of this, being something that can pigeonhole us in the future if we add it. So it's just my thoughts. Okay.
Well, and to double back from what he's just said, there are some developers that are having financial difficulties that have stopped their projects because they ran out of money. So if they have an additional cost on their project, it might not get done.
Any other thoughts on any of these other strategies before we move on?
On
You hit
the-
a nerve with cottage clusters.
Yeah.
I think I kind of knew that coming in.
And on the short-term rentals, anybody have comments about that?
We don't have that many, so,
And I think
We just did code
we already
updates for that,
implemented part
didn't
of
we?
it, so.
Yeah,
yeah, we did.
We just did some code updates for
Sure
that.
did.
but we also had, I mean,
But yeah, the code updates we did were tax.
Yep.
Updates, these would be regulatory updates,
oh,
Yeah.
would
okay,
be different.
And that's still on our goals to tackle this year, so.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
biennium, because we don't want to tackle those before we have that as a strategy.
We want credit for it.
One of us is anxious to do that one, so.
And so did you already get to the, like, promote accessible design standards, or is that still coming?
Oh, I mean, you're welcome to.
No, one of the things I kind of thought of, it talked about city could offer pre-approved plans to homes that most meet standards like these, blah, blah, blah. And my question was, can you reduce permit fees if they are using approved plans? If so, let's say that. So is that? I mean, that seems like, if they're using something that's already been approved and blah, 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 vetted, then can that to use permit fees and be an incentive.
Yeah, probably. I mean, there is the system already in the state of Oregon that you can, I think, I know where you're going, and you can actually approve like ADU plans. And then you would get a reduction on the permit review because they're already approved.
Right.
It could be like a third or something like that.
Okay.
So
And then
yeah, it's not a bad idea though.
Yeah, and then regarding the short-term rentals, I just said, we should also consider limiting the total number of them by neighborhood or by, by type, or, like how many detached houses, apartments, et cetera, or possibly by neighborhood or proximity to other houses. Because, it's really, a nightmare when you get 2 or 3 in a row and they, one has 5 bedrooms and one, it can be really impactful. And that's not really that's not this problem, but it is kind of some of the, it's some of the additional regulation that we're gonna want to consider when we go to round 2 on the.
I think it fits in here because it restricts the houses that are available for long-term rental.
Right.
That's what DL City is gonna want.
Right, but I mean.
Because
how
there's
do you-
been a couple communities like Lincoln City and Hood River, I know, those 2 in particular. That part of the reason the housing went up so quickly, the price of housing, is because half the housing became rental housing.
And so how do you, I guess, that's something that we're gonna need to explore when it's time to get credit for doing that. But I want to know, how do they limit it? Like Ben and stuff, they just kind of said, in this neighborhood, no more new ones. Everybody gets grandfathered and that's it. Other people, I don't know what other towns have done, but that's the kind of stuff that I'd like to
Yeah.
learn about.
Lincoln City Cannon Beach has a lottery system. Lincoln City, Hood River have a maximum number. So yeah, we would want to fully go through all that and explore all the different options to present.
Luckily, there's a lot of
obvious-
case studies for those, right?
What's that?
I said, luckily, there's a lot of case studies for those right
Right.
now.
And, obviously the ones that, took the cheapest housing, most affordable housing and made them rent, long-term rentals are probably so that's kind of another criteria to look at the inventory of it.
Yeah, you bet.
Great, okay. Any other comments on different criteria?
Was that one more category or was that all of them?
There is
One
the,
more.
there is the manufactured home parks category, so it's obviously a big point of emphasis for the state respecting, with respect to housing affordability. It's sort of the last truly affordable housing type.
Right.
And there are ways where the city can leverage resources from the state to help residents explore cooperative ownership agreements. It's helps to ensure that the park doesn't get turned into something else and that they all get displaced in favor of much more expensive housing that they won't be able to afford. So there's ways that we could sort of write that into there and hopefully there wouldn't be a whole lot in the way of city resources going into that, because that's obviously something we want to avoid, but I think that the city would probably have to act as a conduit and an advocate for those people. So there would certainly be a commitment with respect to staff time and that kind of thing, but I think that that's, again, a pretty strong case to be made that that's a strong affordable housing policy that the city could embrace.
I have a question you may not be able to answer in regards to this particular discussion. I'm seeing a lot of people's insurance being canceled on manufactured homes in parks. Would this be any sort of umbrella protection for them if we adopted something like this into the housing plan?
I doubt that the adoption of, I doubt that this strategy would provide that. I don't know, you're right. I wish I knew more about insurance, but I don't. But I think this could be a conduit through which you could address that. And I think that is a really important thing to consider. Probably, I don't know, maybe a little less so in this part of the world, but certainly you can see why that would be a major issue.
And we could certainly explore that more. I think that's a really important piece of that.
I think that would protect people as much as we could, ensure that they stay in their homes and be able to protect themselves and their belongings as well.
Yeah.
I want to reach out to the planning commission members, including those online, Art, and I don't know if Jen's on there or whatever.
She is.
Good. Do you all have any additional suggestions for our consultant on what we should be considering?
We have
In
still
the
one more
HDN?
slide.
Yeah, there's
We have a couple
other.
We have one more slide.
Okay,
I don't want to take us too far backwards, but I do want to share my viewpoint on this cluster housing stuff. I can understand the concerns over actually managing it were it to come to pass. But from a resident point of view, I could see it being attractive to somebody like a single older person or even an older couple or a young couple, but not necessarily people with a bunch of kids. In the context of this meeting, it does seem worth including as a housing production strategy as we acknowledge the difficulty of implementation.
And I have seen that, in Florence, there's a couple of, 55 plus
Senior.
cottage cluster communities that look really nice,
Mhm.
so,
Yeah.
certainly ways you can make it work. And again, this gives you the opportunity to go through the process of setting up the parameters and trying your best to make sure that if those developments do occur, they occur in the way that you want to see them. Real quick, let's skip over to the next slide, which is partnerships. Pretty brief one here. Utilizing surplus public land for future housing development. Now, that doesn't necessarily need to come from the city, but perhaps you work as, again, the facilitator, staff does to sort of help connect maybe county resources. I'm not intimately familiar with what you've got near you in terms of publicly owned land, but that's a strategy that if it connects and you really make that happen, I mean, that's a home run for everyone involved. It's rare that you see those sorts of arrangements occur, but it's something to keep your eyes out for, and I think it's an important one. And again, if you're able to put something like that together, I mean, that's as good as it gets. And then finally, partnering with service providers such as Ant Farm and continuing to sustain your community services officer. Those will both go a long way to address, the homelessness component of this plan and what DLCD wants to see out of it. Yes.
Exhibit B and the slide both say Ant Farm in the singular. I would like that to be generalized,
Okay.
just the way it's written in 5, the partner with, that we have multiple service providers and those will change. over
Well,
time.
and Farm specifically is moving away from working with housing and is going back to working and focusing on its youth programs.
They follow the money.
So,
So that's why I think it's very important to keep this general, so
Yeah.
whatever.
I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
Good point.
I did notice a lot of things that they had going on today as I was driving through the community. I noticed a lot of Ant Farm establishments.
Mm-hmm.
They're very good at finding money and putting it to work in the community.
It's good to see.
They've been very active in Molalla. They opened up chapters in Molalla and Estacado, so
Oh, great.
that they want to have things like what's in Sandy in those two communities too.
Sure.
They're a great organization.
Any comments on these? Any concerns? This is pretty easy to accept, I think. But that's just me.
What's the time?
We
Are you
got
asking about the slide or the?
Oh, sorry, did I go back?
just the partnerships. Great. Okay, well, I'm happy to take any more comments, questions, et cetera, any other commentary, and obviously feel free as you digest what we've talked about tonight to forward your comments on to any member of staff that they'll get to me, because again, your input, everyone's input is crucial in making this thing get through smoothly and do what it should do for this community, which is help you make sure that your housing economy is a strong one and a viable one once we deal with the moratorium. Real quickly, next steps, we will take your input and any input that you provide after this meeting, implement that within the documenting these strategies, start to draft the HPS report, which you will see in draft form before we finalize it. We'll get your review, we'll get DLCD's review, and finalize the HPS, and we'll be done. So any questions, any comments for the good of the order?
Were there no moratorium? What is the expectation that the cities start implementing any of the strategies? What's the timeline on that?
I've seen those timelines be anywhere between 1 and 8 years typically. But,
We're starting some of these right away.
right,
Yeah, oh yeah, I know.
so we'll, in the process of drafting the document, we'll make sure that, we're talking with staff, we're communicating with them in terms of what we think is a realistic timeline. Because what we don't want to do is for this document to set up a bunch of unrealistic expectations, so we'll make sure that we're doing that to the best of our ability.
And then you'll, as the council and the planning commission, you'll have an opportunity to look at those suggested timelines and make refinements.
Right. Yeah, you'll have plenty of opportunity to provide feedback on the document once we have it drafted up.
All right. Thank you so much for.
Thank you all again so much for your time. It's really
Yeah.
impressive to see this many people, to have a joint meeting like this is really cool. So thank you
Lowest
so
my
much.
blood pressure has been at one of these sessions.
Thanks for the planning commission coming
Yeah.
to give us input.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to
You know what I
adjourn the
mean.
workshop and let's plan on getting back 7:05, everybody, is that okay? Call the meeting to order. Let's start with the pledge of allegiance, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you, everybody for coming. We've got a full house. Our agenda, is going to, we're gonna have the roll call, changes to the agenda. I do already have one to suggest that we do the, presentations first, before the consent agenda and all, so we are gonna move that up. After that, we'll have the consent agenda. We'll have, new business for the economic development priorities, and thankfully the Economic Development Advisory Board is here to help us with that. Contract approval for the Portland Bull Run pipeline. And then the contract approval for the transit operation services. So let's go ahead and, is there any other changes to the agenda?
When will the public comment?
At the very beginning, yeah.
Okay.
So let's first take roll call, please.
Okay, Counselor Mayton. Present. Counselor Smallwood.
Here.
Counselor Sheldon. Here. Counselor Ramsayer.
Here.
Counselor Hanley.
Here.
Counselor Hopkinson.
Here.
Mayor Walker.
Here. Okay, do we have any other changes to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll open it up for public comment. So the council welcomes your comments at this time, and I will call on each person when it's your turn to speak for up to 3 minutes. If you're attending the meeting in person, please submit your comments. I've got 2 of those. If there's anybody else out there, please submit your comment form. And then if you're attending the meeting via Zoom, please complete the online comment sign up web form. And hopefully you
And we
got
did
that.
have one,
You
Mayor.
have
yeah.
one. Okay, very good. All right, well, let's go ahead and start with Corey and Sarah Knight. I guess, are you both gonna testify together or one?
Yeah,
one time?
My
Whatever.
name is Corey and this is my wife Sarah. And we filled out 2 forms so we can each get 3 minutes. We'll try to get through this as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Yeah. So the purpose of our presentation tonight is to ask for your support to reinstate my subdivision approval. I bought the property located at 19124 Southeast Jacoby Road in December 2004 to raise my family and was excited to one day develop the property. At the time, I was working for Decal Oregon Inc., who had just bought the property to the north, and I helped work on developing that into Timberline Trail, which is a 117 lot subdivision. In the summer of 2007, I started the process with Irwin Design Group to parcel off a 2-acre piece from the south side of my property. We completed the successful perk test through Clackamas County. The thought at the time was to build a home for my in-laws to move in and help with my first 2 children. I ultimately made the decision to wait until I was able to annex and develop the entire property. On June 19th, 2017, I received a letter from the city of Sandy about my property being included into the urban growth boundary. I hired Tracy Brown Planning Consultants LLC in July 2017 to walk me through the annexation process and application to develop. I paid the application fee and submitted my annex application, which was approved November 6, 2017. From July 2017 through June 2018, I spent time, effort, and resources totaling over $82,000 on consulting, surveys, engineering from all county, pre-application meetings, geotech studies, tree analysis, blueprints, excavations to clear the property, environmental studies, traffic studies, all to prepare a complete application to the city. On December 12, 2018, the city of Sandy sent notice that they had received my application and accepted complete letter, file number 18-025, project name Jacoby Heights. The Planning Commission approved the preliminary plat on May 15, 2019. Code required the final plat to be recorded within 1 year and 1 year extension for a total of 2 years. 2 years ended May 15th, 2021, but just 2 months after the approval, my wife received a diagnosis that rocked us. She is going to share a part of the story here. At the time, we had a 14, 13, 3, and 1.5-year-old.
In July of 2019, I had surgery to remove what we thought was a benign tumor on the right side of my neck. I had had it biopsied when I was pregnant with our youngest, and it tested benign. Unfortunately, the surgeons found a giant tangling tumor wrapped around my parotid salivary gland on my facial nerve branch. Surgery went 4 hours longer than expected, and they didn't get it all out, and the right side of my face was completely paralyzed afterwards. A few weeks later, we were at the park with 3 of our children when the dreaded phone call came that the tumor was actually cancerous. I was sitting on a swing having that conversation, and I clearly remember instantly being terrified, like my whole life had just changed. A month later, I went in for a second surgery to remove everything. My incredible surgeons got all the cancer out and reattached all of my facial nerves. 9 hours later, I woke up crying with gratitude and relief to learn it was all out. And while that was the best news possible, we were still in a state of complete survival mode with the 1, 3, 13, and 14-year-old. We had multiple people helping with the children while I recovered for months with a swollen face, drain out of my neck, a painful eye that would not close, did speech therapy to learn how to chew and eat again. I wish I could accurately describe the state of shock and survival we were in during that time, and it's easy to understand why my health, recovery, and caring for our children suddenly became our only priorities. I'm grateful to have a beautiful recovery, regaining a ton of movement in my face, and I'm blessed to share this coming August will be my 6th year cancer-free.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So then 2020 happened, and then everything paused. May 11th, 2022, I went back to the city and explained our major life event to Kelly and the staff by paying for an additional and organizing another pre-app meeting, and was basically told that my application expired and there was nothing that I could do except for reapply. I have been in communication with Kelly about resubmitting my application and paying the additional fees for several years now, and I've been told that the city is no longer able to accept applications due to the sewer moratorium. The frustration that I have now is that prior to annexing my property to the city, with the understanding that I would be able to develop under the previous county zoning, I was able to partition my property as the zoning was RRFF5 and it met the qualifications. The purpose of us being here tonight is to ask for staff consideration to review our situation, get an approval extension on our previously approved application. The second best option would be able to allow me to partition off a buildable lot and put in a septic system that I was previously allowed to do under Clackamas County zoning prior to annexing to the city. It is my understanding that the City Council adopted an ordinance last year, Ordinance 2024-09, that allowed the extension of certain projects affected by the sewer moratorium. I am asking for this ordinance to be amended to include our project. Thank you guys very much for your time today and your consideration of our story and the desire of ours to move forward.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lloyd.
So our process, I don't know if anybody shared it with me, but our process is then that, you know, the staff will be kind of working with us in the future to just let us know kind of what the situation is, and they'll come back at the next meeting with some feedback and response on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Okay, our next item on the agenda is a presentation by Chief Huston.
Mayor, we did have that one online. as
Oh, I'm
well.
sorry, that's right. I'm sorry, out of line. So we have Austin Ernesti, is that right?
That is right. Austin, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Please state your name and for the record.
My name is Austin Ernesti. Am I coming through?
Yes, we hear you. Thank you, Austin. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, folks. I'm back to ask about money for sick. Actually, I'm here kind of embarrassed. I feel that I may have dropped the ball on this one due to some miscommunications. I had planned on coming back to you guys like a month ago, but I have also been working with our city staff, and this again is on me. I've been saying to Jeff and Patrick and Kelly, like, oh, maybe I need to go back before city council, and they would tell me, oh no, you're good on that. And they were coming from each of their prospective zones about noise ordinances or signage, not about the funding for this event. So we come before you again to ask for money for the Sick Festival, which is actually just in 2 weeks. We are asking for $15,000, mostly due to things like advertising. We still have this awesome ability in our modern digital world in order to just put up billboards across big cities and stuff. And so we still have some of those ready to go in the barrel and to sign up tomorrow if we get approved for some funds. We would also like to use some of this, though, to bolster up our event. One of the things that we kind of have lacked in previous years is something for the families and kids to do. And so while we've beefed that up with some of our logging stuff, we would also like to put in bounce houses and shuttle runs, of which we could still get done. And then the most important thing that we really want to use these funds for is Mr. Tree, who does a big, huge pumpkin patch. He has a food cart, and we would love to provide really cheap food for families. And so, back in the days when you could get, $1 hot dog, chips, and a drink, we would love to bring that back and use some of these funds to kind of supplement some of that. And that's kind of where we're looking at. Last year, our budget was actually only $11,000 due to some really nice gift donations in kind and site development. This year, we're looking for about $24K, and we are definitely short on that. So we're looking for the city to kind of help come in on this. Looking forward, this is our 3rd year. Our first year, we had 650 guests. Last year, we had over 2,500, and we would like to aim for over 5,000 this year. We have 24 carvers currently signed up, and we have a goal to be on ESPN by year 5. Next year, the Pacific Northwest Chainsaw Carving Circuit will get up and running as well, and we are looking to be the #1 slot in that to start off the entire circuit for the year. That's all I've got. Dawn, I'm really sorry I didn't send you an invitation to our fundraiser. I didn't because we had already sold out every single table by the time I had talked to you, which, by the way, we raised $40,000 that's going back into the community between scholarships and work study programs for our youth.
Hey, Austin, can you define SICC for everybody who might not know what that is?
Oh, yeah. So the Sandy Invitational Chainsaw Carving, and it starts out with just some chainsaw carving stuff, right? We had no idea what we were doing, but we knew that Estacada had the Timber Festival and it had kind of fallen apart. And so we thought, well, let's bring the sexy thing up here and reinvent it. And here we are, a couple years later with an actual pretty big event and in the timber sports and carving world. The real focus for all of this is like the chainsaw stuff is all just the cool things to get people there. The real focus is on trades. And so Clackamas Clackamas County Fire is coming out, and we've got AMR. I think we're going to be doing some welding off the back of a truck that Ford can do. So there's all kinds of really cool things that we're going to be doing out there that support the trades and honor our forestry. We've also got, OSU and Mount Hood Community College and the FNRL and all of these other great organizations. Oregon Women in Timber will all be there. I think we had 37 vendors total last year.
Great.
Thank you, Austin. I appreciate it.
And again, I am so sorry about not coming back earlier. I thought I was doing the right thing by not taking up more of your time, but I was just misunderstanding what the smart people at the city were telling me.
Okay, well, I guess I don't know that we can't really make a decision here. It's not on the agenda. It's not in our budget. And I'm, with the thing 2 weeks out, I'm a little bit, I think it's probably not going to happen, but
I'd like to talk about my staff report.
Yeah.
I'm
Not right now.
It's
'cause we
not
got
on
other
the
things.
agenda, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And,
I'd like to
and
bring
it
it up
wasn't
in my
discussed in our
staff
budget
report.
meeting and stuff, but yeah, we can bring it up later. Okay, so let's get our presentation on folks up here. We have outstanding service awards to be presented by Chief Husky.
Thank you, Mayor Walker. council members. This is an outstanding service award that we have not given historically. This is brand new to our department. I'd like to recognize Deputy District Attorney Tiffany Escobar, who's seated back here in the back of the room. I promised I wouldn't make her talk. But thanks to her, she really brought this to light. It was something I was aware, I think all of us were aware of the PD that these two officers had done for us, but we weren't really privy to the detail and effort that they did. So I'm going to read this. It's a little long-winded, but it'll provide the story for you folks. To Officer Quentin Carter and Officer Michael Boyes, the Sandy Police Department is pleased to recognize both of you with an outstanding service award. Attached to this letter is an email drafted by Deputy District Attorney Tiffany Escobar, which was sent to me on March 13th, 2025. It highlights from her email are as follows. Chief Husky, I feel compelled to write to you today in appreciation of two of your officers who went above and beyond to protect the community they serve. Officer Quentin Carter and Officer Michael Boyes, about a year ago, I received a Sandy PD case to review for a single charge of initiating a false report against a female suspect who was already familiar with, as we had a pending DUI case against her after she crashed on Highway 26 with her 1-year-old daughter in the car and had a .127 BAC about 4 hours later. The suspect had a prior DUI in Multnomah County in 2017 and picked up new convictions in Clackamas County in 2018. Where she was reportedly driving 90 miles per hour on Highway 26 when she crashed into the back of a truck, grabbed her infant daughter, and fled the scene. It was suspected she was impaired, but law enforcement was unable to contact her until the next day, so she was never charged with DUI related to that incident. Fast forward to March 29th, 2024. Another agency observed the suspect, who had a misdemeanor suspended license for refusing a breath test on her pending DUI case, driving halfway in her lane and halfway on the shoulder. A traffic stop was initiated and it was immediately apparent that she was extremely intoxicated. Her 6-year-old son was buckled into the back seat. For reasons unknown, that officer elected not to conduct a DUI investigation. Instead, he parked her car and gave her and her child a ride to their friend's house. In her belligerent state, she immediately asked her friend to drive her home to Sandy. The friend obliged and offered to keep her son for the night since she was in no shape to care for her child. Once she got home, with seemingly no memory of the earlier events, she called 911 and reported that her vehicle had been stolen with her child inside, prompting a massive multi-agency law enforcement response. At some point, the original officer from a neighboring agency heard the call about an abducted child, and finally reported his earlier encounter with the suspect. Officer Carter and Officer Boyes both responded to the call. Once they were able to piece together the prior events, Officer Boyes drove to Gresham so he could put eyes on the child to ensure the child was safe. I reviewed the case a couple weeks later for potential criminal charges and learned that the traffic stop occurred within 1 mile of the Clackamas County line. I threw out the idea of charging the DUI in Clackamas County, and Officer Carter immediately offered to do any follow-up necessary to ensure the suspect was held accountable. Officer Carter quickly completed a terrific follow-up investigation and built an impressively strong case, which allowed me to charge the suspect with DUI, reckless driving, reckless endangering, and driving while suspended. While the two DUI cases were pending, additional incidents continued to flow in. In one case, a passerby reported her vehicle was stopped in the middle of an intersection with a female passed out in the driver's seat and a child buckled into the back seat. She was also caught driving while suspended on May 2nd, 2024 and on 8/13/2024. She left her 2 children unattended at her apartment while she went to the store with her sex offender boyfriend to buy cigarettes. At some point, the children woke up and went looking for their mother. A neighbor called 911 after finding the 2 children wandering around the apartment complex screaming for their mother around 11:30 p.m. Officer Boyes arrived at the apartment before the suspect returned home and went above and beyond in his investigation, effectively shutting down every ridiculous excuse she provided. I included all these facts to show the serious risk that she posed to her children and the community. Thanks to the dedication of Officer Carter and Officer Boyes, she is finally being held accountable. She will be on supervised probation for 5 years, which is the maximum allowed by law on misdemeanors. She will serve about 15 days in jail, be placed on alcohol monitoring for 60 days upon her release, and she will be required to successfully complete a DUI court program, which includes intensive substance abuse treatment, weekly court appearances, random urine analysis screening, at the highest level of supervision our probation office has. Lastly, she will be required to complete a parenting course, and her license will be suspended for 3 years. If she violates probation, she faces up to 364 days on each charge. If she picks up a new DUI in the next 10 years, it will be a felony, and she will be looking at a lengthy prison sentence. It is extremely rare to get this level of supervision on an offender convicted of only misdemeanors who had no prior DUI convictions. This speaks volumes to the quality of investigation your officers conducted. I strongly believe this is a great resolution from a community safety standpoint, and is something we would never have been able to achieve if it weren't for the outstanding work of Officer Carter and Officer Boyce. They probably saved those children's lives. So the important notes for me, as I was reading this email from the DDA, there are things that the DDA Escobar wrote regarding the achievement, which grabbed my attention. She stated about a year ago, clearly, by these words, we don't give up. We follow through until there's nothing left to follow up with. And I want to highlight that because this is what I have known about our officers in general here at Sandy Police Department. What I see in practice each and every day at Sandy PD is that our officers don't give up on casework. I have seen and now have come to expect diligent follow-up in our investigations. As DDA Escobar has illustrated, where others fell short, Boyce and Carter did not. They collaborated with the district attorney's office and turned numerous calls for service into a successful investigation. In short, a suspect who has been a thorn in the side of law enforcement and our prosecutors since 2017 has been served justice. This suspect endangered the lives of traveling motorists in our community and our own children on multiple occasions. It is with great satisfaction that I pass along this appreciation from the Clackamas County District Attorney's Office. It is an honor to present the Sandy Police Department Award for Outstanding Service to Officer Boyce and Officer Carter.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, I'd like to thank our DDA.
Thank you, gentlemen.
That is just
Thank you, Mayor
fantastic.
Walker.
Thank you so much. Thank you, officers.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for bringing that email to us
Yeah, that's.
and for doing that work.
You're a
because
great officer now.
But it
Yeah.
takes everybody, so thank you.
Thank you. So lucky to have you.
Mayor, I'm just gonna set this case back up.
I mean, yeah. Yeah.
Nice to meet you too.
Oh, there are people sitting there.
Yeah, no, no.
Thank you.
Because we never do this. I understand these things. I just got the one. I was gonna ask for some clarification.
Judith here. Okay, I'll start with the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we have the city council meeting minutes from April 21st. We have the IGA approval with the city of Lake Oswego for them doing our after hours entry notes, and a noise reduction, a noise exception approvals for both the Sandy Invitational Chainsaw Carving and the 4th of July block party on Coral Burst. So if I could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
I have a second from Counselor Sheldon and a second from Counselor Wilkinson to approve the consent agenda.
And Mayor, I'm going to abstain from this vote only because the block party on Coralburst is, I'm part of that, so I don't want to
You're not
vote on.
opposed to it, though.
I'm not opposed to it.
Okay.
But I just don't want to vote on something that affects me directly.
Very good, thank you. Okay, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Motion passes. Next is the new business is the economic development priorities, and we've got our consultant here.
Yeah, so I'll invite John Lagarza, who is our economic development consultant, and then
We have our,
economic development advisory board members. If you want to come sit at the tables, feel free to move your way up.
Can you spell last name, John?
Lagarza, Legarza.
Thank you.
Yep.
You might need one more
John
chair.
Rich.
Apologies.
JON.
Yeah, or maybe we're okay. Okay.
Now I tell you right after you leave.
It's all right. Let's go get the rest of the parent.
is there any other folks on Zoom from the, I can't remember who was on there.
Oh, yeah, so we do have Chris Jones.
Okay,
On Zoom.
okay, great.
I believe that's all.
Okay, very good. Good to know. Hi, Chris.
If she's still muted.
Hello, sorry about that. Couldn't find the
All right,
Yeah, I'll
Tyler,
just
kick
kick us
off.
off here. So as the council and EDAB, as we'll call you this evening, because it's otherwise a mouthful, is aware, we recently executed a contract with John Lagarza to provide some economic development support for our community. Staff has met with John, gosh, several times now. I couldn't count them off the top of my head, but several times to talk about the economic development strategic plans, maybe low-hanging fruit, for lack of a better term, of what we can do sort of right off the bat to get some good economic development work happening here. He has a brief presentation that I think we'll go through, so I'll just turn it over to John, and you can maybe tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you got here, and then kick it off.
Perfect,
with
yeah,
economic
well,
development.
thank you, Tyler, and Mayor Walker and Council. John Lagarza, Healthy Sustainable Communities. I'm excited to be here this evening. Our firm works with cities in the state of Oregon here. We provide fractional support, so we help cities that need to kind of fill that economic development area. We also do strategic planning, so we work with cities on council goal settings and looking at 5-year, 10-year strategy. A lot of times cities kind of get down into the weeds looking at, fixing between 3rd and 4th Street on the sidewalk, I think, instead of thinking about where they're going to go with infrastructure and what the important parts and components are those needed in a structural for a city to be sound there. And we also do urban renewal modeling, and we help with, we have a software program that really looks at what the data is on urban renewal, what the assessed value is, and the importance of that within a community, and how to really think about kind of structuring those programs. But I'm excited to be here tonight, and I'm excited to be doing work here for the city of Sandy. And really excited to just met some of the folks here on the EDAB board, so I get that right, because every city kind of does it a little bit differently. But this is exciting, and I'm glad that the council, you and the mayor and the council and staff is looking at how to fill that gap during this time of what you're going through with the sewer moratorium here. I think it's real important, and I'm just kind of, if we could put the slide, maybe that shows up here, Jeff. I kind of wanted to get some, I've got the slide presentation here for the council to, give us some feedback. We've got the board here too, for the economic board. So really just trying to think about like what could be a good work plan to start with the board that the council sees, to be able to work with the board. I'd like to start, the first meeting in June. And I really want to get your feedback from this tonight. So it can be an open discussion, and we have Jeremy and I haven't had the chance to, I met Hans, I haven't had a chance to meet. Maybe we can, what is your name, sir? Darren and Aaron. So pleasure to meet everyone here, but I really value healthy, good conversation, because I think as we, it's a critical time now. And if you look at the first thing up here that I kind of talk about, like, there's 4 things that I think the city, the council and the board need to think about. One is messaging, and, your staff is right now finishing up getting that messaging ready to go out on the sewer moratorium, but really staying ahead of that, right? And really getting awareness out to businesses that they understand the timing and what's being done for the sewer moratorium, right? So that's the most important thing is really thinking about how we get out in front and to communicate that to the business community, right? They need to have the true story. We need to, we need to be at some events and really be able to share that information. So we have clear messaging on the steps that we're taking and the timeline. So that just helps solidify the community from that standpoint there. The second thing I really talk about is, before I came to the meeting tonight, I spent a little time just walking up and down just the street, and I went from the Thai food restaurant to here. Half the buildings are vacant, and that's a challenge. And it shouldn't be, but we gotta address that, and we really need to look at what the underlying issues are. There's different issues, I'm sure, with each property owners, or whether it's the rental rates, but we gotta take a deeper dive, and we gotta have the hard conversations with those property owners to find out what is challenges for them. I look at some of the buildings, they're open on the weekends, some of them are still got, furniture in front, and the flooring's torn up in them, others are just shut, so that's something I think could be a really good project to think about for the, Economic Development Board, is like we get a database, we understand what everyone is charging in rent, and we can build an interactive spot on the website to think about that from that standpoint there. And then I think when you look at that and you think about, what are some ways that we can incentivize that? And I'll talk about that when we go to a couple other slides here that you have here, but then thinking about like what that business attraction strategy would be to backfill those spaces and how we got to work with those owners, those landlords, those tenants, and try and, find some solutions that work into that there. So I'll stop right there because that was a lot, but that's kind of the four things I'm going to hit tonight to talk about with you all here. So any questions on that so far? Okay, the last one that I think is low hanging fruit, that when you drive through Sandy, we got to get our wayfinding improved. We got to get some banners. We got to work on getting our signage up. I mean, if I'm coming through this town, I should know where some spots are to go. I think that, the city's done a good job, but I think we can build on it. And I know the team's put together a great wayfinding package, but I think that could be a great opportunity, working with the Economic Development Board, finding a way that we can bring back and look at how we can get some of this signage and banners up, right? I mean, the banners are old, they're dated. We need to, get some new banners up. Think about how we get signage, directional signage, some QR codes and stuff to help people find their way around the town here. So, that, if we can go to the next slide there, that'd be great there.
I think you jumped.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
this was the.
Oh, okay, there's,
wayfinding,
okay,
yeah.
wayfinding, okay. So the facade improvement program, one of the things I think that you're the urban renewal board too. And looking at your urban renewal, I think you should consider, one of the things that we can help you do is we have software and we believe in data. And we believe in looking at where the numbers are on the assessed values and where the improvements should be going. So we can look at your whole city and we can look at the area where your urban renewal is at. And we go to a parcel level. So we go to a granular level. So we can look and understand what has increased in valuation. So to really maybe rethink some of your urban renewal funding on where that should be directed and how that should be directed. So not that it's started and it's moved on, but now maybe a time to take a chance to work with the board here to think about like where that opportunity to be investing those urban renewal dollars. And for example, like really understanding where those underutilized properties are within your boundary, or even maybe adjusting your boundary from that extent. So that's something I think for you guys to consider going through as a funding stream in some of these main street improvements and finding your way finding and looking for industrial development activities there. So does that ring a bell with anyone or thoughts for anybody on that? Okay, all right. So
Before you leave that slide. So right now, my understanding is our program is kind of. We're figuring it out.
Right.
So I think this lines up well with what we need to do. And in regards to your wayfinding. Because the highway runs through our town, we need to make sure whatever we do signage wise and plan integrates with ODOT's.
Do we got to work with that agency?
No, but.
You're right.
So, but I mean, some of our businesses do have ODOT signs.
Absolutely.
Point to them, so we just want, it would be nice to make sure.
In my understanding, Counselor, that yes, Kelly said, ODOT was good to work with in the past. I think it's just, we need to engage them. We need to have them realize that it's a critical component of a town, you know, they go through every town, and we see this in every town, either you gotta get them in here, and we gotta talk to them regularly, and we gotta show them what we're doing, right? And it just, eventually they come along, but it takes a little bit to bring them along, so. But you're right there, so. And then I think, you know, go to the next slide, could you please, Jeff, there?
Is that this one?
Yeah, it's industrial land, so. Again, we have industrial land here, right? We got to get the communication strategy developed, which they're working on, get that out to the business community, be able to communicate that to the industrial community and the commercial community. But really understanding that where our industrial property is, right? And being able to think again, like, you know, if we tweak some of us in there, renewal, some of us out, but really thinking about the technical assistance to be able to help these industrial landlords or owners of property be able to see how they can find a pathway to their development, right? And a lot of times it's just the ability to understand like what the test fitting will fit on their parcel, right? So if a property owner can understand it's a 40,000 square foot building and here's how the accessibility would go, that helps them to start thinking about what can fit. And it also helps us to be able to work with industrial brokers that are looking to come into the area in the future. But so you have this, you know, your storytelling, and when your sewer moratorium is placed, be able to work with some of your industrial property or ones that you have existing. So like road fabrication, help those people to be able to move forward in this process. So that's, it's real important. It's critical for Sandy and for our workforce as we build out here in the future. We want jobs here. We want good, you know, good types of jobs in here and be able to, you know, provide that site selection ready availability to help them see that pathway there. So,
John?
Yes.
Does this section just primarily focused on undeveloped land that's?
It could be both.
Or is it vacant industrial land
think
that's already been built up?
I think it's vacant industrial land and it can also be underutilized. So one of the things that you see sometimes is you might have a 5-acre parcel here in this town and it's got a 20,000 square foot building. It's industrial zone. It's underutilized, right? So that, and it might be, you know, what we call close to shovel ready because it's got all the utilities there and it potentially have a larger building on that property. So it's not only just in vacant land, but it's also in underutilized land. So really understanding like what could happen in these areas is important from that standpoint there.
My second question when I read this, why wouldn't we just expand this to be commercial as well, especially the bigger commercial?
I think that's that's why we're here tonight. I love that question.
Well, I think I kind of had a similar question on that track, and that is that when you look at what's actually on our industrial park land and our light industrial land, it's, you know, everything from movie theaters, tanning spas, restaurants, bars, you know, fitness centers, the whippersnappers, you know, those are all, most of those are, I think, on the industrial park land. And so trying to kind of, when I saw this, I was just trying to figure out, is this, you know, are we talking the heavy industrial, which that part hasn't been developed yet. That's the stuff that's kind of past the nursery there, past Tractor Supply. But the light industrial, a lot of that already is kind of what you would think of the traditional, but there's
I was
still
thinking the
some
old barn
stores and
district
things
as
like
well,
that.
though.
Yes, thank you.
I was
Yes.
thinking the old barn district
Mhm.
as far as adding that to this, because everything on here would apply to that area, Bell Street.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I think what I think is that if we're really concerned about protecting our industrial land, you know, we need to kind of look at, you know, how is it getting developed? And right now you can, Kelly, you're still, it's kind of like soup to nuts that you can pretty much put just about anything on the industrial park land and things like that. And so it's just kind of a little bit confusing. We have our commercial land and we want the commercial land to develop as commercial. But what happens, I think, naturally is that some of the commercial stuff develops in these industrial parks because much cheaper rent, probably less visibility, but you know, they're kind of going to the cheaper rent and stuff. And so just having that discussion about, you know, is that okay? Maybe it is, I don't know, but just having that discussion about, you know, how do we manage this industrial land? And then I would also agree, like with what you guys said about, you know, considering the commercial land. That's kind of a little bit of a longer term thing because it does, you know, come up against the moratorium.
No, because we've approved alternative.
We might be able to do
Systems.
something for alternative,
Yeah.
for the right
For the right business.
business.
So over the last 20 years, the city council with the planning commission and the planner has adjusted the usage of the I1, I2, C1, C2, and so they've kind of like blended a lot for that purpose to allow for the right business when the right business and the right thing came. So that's just historically for the last 20 years of why you see that. Either way, economic development crosses all those, not just the C1 or C2, so.
So that was, yes, you would be okay with this slide applying to commercial. That's what I heard.
I think it's great. I think what you'd want to do is, to what Jeremy's talking about, like, and that's quite common. You'll see a little bit, cities will adjust their code one way or another, depending who owns land. And, we see this a lot of times with the older mill sites, like they don't want the heavy industrial right in the middle of town now because the town's surrounded it, right? So naturally, they don't want a, food processing center in the middle of town. So the code starts to change to more like light industrial. So I think understanding like what those criteria would be for each of those zones is beneficial. And then you could set up like, it'd pretty much be a similar program providing technical assistance, but it might be a little bit different for, an I1 versus an I2, but and versus commercial. But I think each of those would be something that the Economic Development Board could provide some input back to from that standpoint there.
I think a perfect example is down where Whippersnappers is in that little footprint, or what do you want to call it, a cluster, since we're talking about clusters in there.
Don't go.
Don't go there, okay.
We're not doing much for housing.
Clustering businesses, gardening, that, the owner there made and came to us and said, hey, I want to change this into commercial versus that. But then there were some requirements that had to happen to do that. And I don't know where the process is. Maybe I'm stepping into something here, but changing the facade and changing what the looks of those types of things are so that, that could happen. So those are ideas that take.
Priority wise, I think you nailed it up front. It's empty buildings.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we've been talking about that for as long as I've been on council.
Well, to me, it would be empty buildings and then actively pursuing certain businesses, these key
Ones that will
businesses
change things.
to, so.
Ones that
those-
we want to attract.
Yeah,
Yes,
going after
thank
what
you.
you, what
Those
we're
would be my
missing,
two.
fill the holes of
We
what we're
spent a lot of
missing.
money on Bell Street, and it'd be nice to get stuff lined up to.
To develop that area.
Yeah, see, and all that.
Are they able to develop Bell Street now with the moratorium?
So we approved alternative systems. Depending on what it was, but so there is opportunity for different types of sewer systems to go into.
So we haven't
There's
approved it
someone
yet.
limited.
but
I was
gonna say that has
we're
not been
going
approved
to.
No, that has,
Or we're
yeah,
looking to.
we talked
approve
about the
some
road
work
fabrication.
We're looking at bringing that back towards the end of
So we haven't
July.
approved it
We
yet.
haven't approved it, okay. We've talked about it a lot.
Provided some
But the point is.
direction to bring it back in the future with counselor comments, and so.
I think we're expecting the Economic Development Board to put things in that pipeline and work with our public works to remove any barrier that we can, figure out how to get those in there. Rather, I think it would be wrong to put a blanket, no, we're not doing anything in the moratorium. We have very tough constraints we have to work within, but there may be some wiggle room on in some cases. Kelly may be saying, no, there isn't, but we're pushing them to find wiggle room.
I'm not saying no to anything.
Right.
I'm just listening back here.
I just really, I feel like a lot of times when we do this, we kind of dominate this conversation. I hate to put them on the spot, but we have not had one of these for a long time and there's some new faces and I would love to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak all the time, so.
Yeah, you
They're tired of hearing.
You weren't the new face.
I'm here to catch up because I don't think we've had a meeting in 8-9 months or.
We've been on pause for a while because of council changeover and also staffing changeover that we haven't had a chance to meet. So this is the first time I've met our
Likewise.
consultant as well. So we're excited to get things going and moving forward now that we have some direction. And so I appreciate bringing the slides and that and
I like what we're hearing, and I think the number one, like I agree, is the vacant buildings. It's not a good look for Sandy. It just needs to be addressed and someone going actively after the business. We need to identify the businesses we want. like Next Adventure is going out of business. I think this town's gonna need something to take that place, so. Who do we approach for that, you know, whatever niche items that we're missing, we need to find out what we're missing and get those, go after those people, but getting the vacant. The downtown's never gonna thrive or make people wanna stop if you see empty buildings that look run down, so. I'm interested in that, and then also, you know, Bell Street, it was a big investment, and there's a lot of land there, and what are we gonna do with that, how's that gonna look? It's kind of a waste to have it just sitting there, when it's a good opportunity.
I think my push for economic development definitely happened last week at the budget meeting, but I'm loving everything I'm hearing so far. You know, and just to kind of repeat exactly what's been said, I love the push for those vacancy buildings, getting folks in there, revitalizing that downtown core with those vacancies, with the Wayfinder signs, and really driving that business, finding those select big businesses to kind of go and change things for that 362nd Bell. It accomplishes, you know, what my goals would be, at least at the start.
I think kind of with the vacancies we talked about, really basically advertising that this is, if during the moratorium, these vacancies are valuable because you can't build something new, so utilize these ones that already have ERUs allocated to them. And that I like the idea of alternative treatment systems, but I think we need to talk about the barriers to that, because once you get DEQ involved, there's a logistic and cost, you know, barrier for that. So it would be, we'd need to look at helping businesses get over those challenges with those, but I would appreciate if the city would allow it, but just kind of in helping business owners utilize that. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to meeting more, because yeah, we have, so we can talk about some of these things.
I just wanted to add one more thing on the Bell Street, I think it's the Sabella property or on the other side. That's huge, that's gonna be the entrance to Sandy, that's gonna be the first thing that anybody sees coming in, and how we develop that's really gonna set the tone for what people think of the city. So it's an important piece, because that's gonna be their opinion, their view of the city as it comes in.
So I think, you know, the city has always taken an approach as being very neutral on what kind of businesses come in, just let, you know, like, hey, let's come in. And I think we need to take a different approach. And when we started the Economic Development Committee, way back when, you know, is looking at like, why we built a plan. What is it that our residents want? You know, what is it what we need versus just like, oh, I got an idea and I want to go start, you know, another XYZ. Well, we have 10 other XYZs in town, and not to call anyone out, but you know, versus like, what can the city get behind money wise or political or just advertising? Because there's a lot of power when council goes to it. I don't even know what do you call it, an expo, let's just say. And I heard about this the first time I ever went to the National League of Cities, and I was in the group, and I never knew this existed, where they said, you know what, the small town, very similar to Sandy, had a highway going through it, and I forget what the business was, because you know that was, you know, like 20 years ago.
How long?
Like 20 years ago.
Okay.
But it's an inside joke. But the point is they went there with their cut sheet, what they wanted, and they got what they wanted, even though the business said they would never go there, but they didn't know they would never go there. But they're like, hey, we have the right thing. We have Mount Hood right here. Like, how can we capitalize on this, right? For so many different businesses. We have Next Adventure. Unfortunately, they decided to retire, and, you know, or I read that and I was just like, oh man, what, this is crazy for Sandy and for them. But how do we, you know, capitalize on that? We need to be able to go out and do that. And we need to be able to go actively and not just be passive of what business comes into town. There, we have a plan and we have the things that we want. Now, how do we attract that for what's good for Sandy? Because businesses will come and they have the right to do so, whatever they are. But what is it that we need and what we want as a community to really then grow on? And we have the land there at Bell Street. We also have all this undeveloped land inside our downtown even, or, you know, some of it light, and what do we do? And that comes back to policies and those type of things. And then we have the urban renewal district that has so many different tools in its bag that we can use to really help change and be part of that, if that's what the council and the economic, or not the the board of the Urban Renewal District, the SUR board. So anyways, I look forward to those. I look forward to some new fresh ideas coming in and really implementing what we have here. We have this now. We just got to go use it. If we don't use it, then it's just another big old plan that we stick on the shelf and, 5 years later, maybe I'll still be here and, yeah, like doing a new one that
25 years.
well, no, I'm really old. Anyway, but the idea is we need to implement and start working on that. And so we have a good board that is really, wanting to think there.
I want to get Chris, she's on Zoom for us.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about Chris.
And is there anybody else besides Chris on Zoom?
Looks like just Chris.
Okay, let's hear from her and then I want to hear from counselors.
Hi, sorry about that. So I agree with like so many of the points that everybody's been making. I agree that asking, going out to the businesses and get the businesses in would be ideal. And actually that is one of the things that my board would like to see happen too. And if there's a way the chamber can help with that, bringing those in. We do also have a plan for some of the empty buildings around with some of the high school kids, trying to get them to build business plans and get scholarships out of that. So that'll be something we're working on next year. The school district has asked us to hold off because they'll have a new business teacher for that piece of it. But we would love to see those empty buildings. That's one of my biggest things that I would like to see done, especially through this group. And if there's a way, obviously the group can help the board, but if as a chamber too can be involved, we'd love to help with that. And I do agree with losing Next Adventure. That's one of the things we've been talking about. It's like, okay, what now if we're that hub to get up to the mountain and the rentals and all of that stuff? Who's going to service that with autos gone also?
Okay, Chris.
Yeah, I'll just be brief. I'm also on the Economic Development Board.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not going to repeat everything everybody said. I agree with everything they said. As far as building the downtown infrastructure back up and bringing people back in to the buildings that already have toilets in them so that we don't have to worry about the moratorium. And then also Bell Street, as everybody mentioned to you. From my perspective, it was really about changing one thing. And one of the big things I advocate for on the Economic Development Board when I sit on it is to make Sandy not a drive-through city anymore. We've got so many people passing through and they will stop, they'll fill up their gas, they'll go to the C-store, they'll stop for lunch or dinner, but we want people to come here as a destination. We want them to stop and stay for a while. And then maybe walk around town and visit some of the businesses that are here, that are local. So we're looking for that to be that hub, I think, which requires a little bit more than what we currently have. So we need that vision and we need that I think the board's job is to go find that business and create those relationships so that we can start, filling up some of that space when our moratorium does become more accessible to us.
Okay, Lindy.
Yes, I wanted you to hear more about the wayfinding signs and what does that actually look like and how could we possibly integrate it? One of our council goals is to integrate a heritage tour or historic preservation in some of our older properties and sites. What do wayfinding signs actually look like and what,
What do they, well, it can look like a lot of things. The city, Kelly shared with me, the city has done a wayfinding program. It's been a few years ago, right? But, kind of maybe refreshing that and looking like to, just what like Councilor Mason talked about is just, wayfinding is directional signage, informational signage. We could probably tie into heritage signage in there, like our heritage walking. But it's really creating, if I stop at like Joe's to get a donut before I go up and there's a directional signage there that says, oh, the library's over here. Or this is, it's helping people identify more in your city where to go. And that's just, we want to capture them, right? So, and as you drive into the town, you start branding a little bit more of what Sandy looks like, right? So that really people, when they're approaching the town, like just to what Hans was talking, right? Like we got to start out there catching people as they come in and in the banners and awareness, and events. So it's just really helping to keep those folks here. And having the ability to be able to go around your town and learn about things, and I think it's a good opportunity to work with Economic Development Board about like what that could look like and what those pieces are and bring some different options back, because I know Kelly's done a lot of work and we don't want to go back out and reinvent the work, but I think we can build on that and bring some back some, some different color themes and some different ideas. And I think it's low hanging fruit that can be, that you can start to really catch people's eyes when you're coming through your town there. So.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you for being here. I want to start out by saying, thank you for your ideas. That's one of the things I'd really like to see. This is my second term on council. I'm also on the Economic Development Board.
Is everyone on the board?
No, it's the mayor, myself, and Chris.
Okay.
But one of the things that I've seen as a challenge for us as a city as a whole is these boards work in a lot of silos. And while we will put a council member on a board and we report back, I feel like there's a lot of silos that occur. And when it comes to economic development, I think that's one of those that we really have to break out of these silos and start figuring out a more integrated way to work as a city. That being said, I'd really like this board to come forward. By all means, I don't begin to even have all the answers, but I'd really like us to come forward with a plan of how we can leverage some of our urban renewal funds to fix some of these issues and really start to combat that. I'd also like us to come up with a plan on how we plan to build these derelict buildings that we keep discussing ad nauseum in here. And one of those things is I think we can leverage funds, but I also think there's some code amendments that we need to make as a council, i.e. to the derelict buildings and what recourses they have for remaining unoccupied for so long. And maybe
building ordinances.
yes. And so but it has a lot of influence when these boards make up those plans and present them to council. And I'd really like that to be a goal for this board moving forward. Then the last thing I have noted is the alternative sewer treatments. It hasn't been approved yet. I had that to note down there, but I do think we should. I think we should really be looking at that. And I'd really like a lot of feedback from the Economic Development Board, because what would be really awesome is if we figure out a way that we can move forward with at least some development, especially in our commercial and residential industrial areas. I hear a lot of feedback from developers that we're going to kill them with fees and I understand that plight. But I also recognize that we are where we are right now. So let's figure out a path but how awesome would that be if there was already a demand in place for more housing before? And I think the way we start to get that way is if we can develop some of this commercial and industrial area. And so how do we make that plan so that we can move forward with at least where we can? And I'd really like us as a economic board to think outside of that and think about what other avenues in the city we can leverage to move us forward and kind of break down some of that silo. Those are just my goals and plans and thoughts on them.
Okay, I want to have everybody talk, and I haven't said anything, but Christine, go ahead.
Oh, I'm looking through my notes. Kelly, maybe you could help me out. We had a developer who was ready to start building over on Industrial Way and have 40, 80 living wage jobs. And we were held up because of the moratorium and the
rogue fabrication.
Yes, rogue fabrication. To me, that's a missed opportunity if we can come up with an alternative septic system, if we're working on that. It doesn't have to be permanent, it can be temporary, but we can get that business in here. It's gonna take a couple of years to get it started, but then we can support people moving in with enough living wage jobs and consistent jobs in manufacturing, I believe it was, to keep people here, to keep growth going. And I think that's a big opportunity that we can look into getting. It's been over a year now. I'm looking through my minutes and I can't find the dates that we discussed it on Planning Commission, but to me, that's important that we do our best to find a path to get that in. The empty storefronts, we need to figure out a way to get people in there. It's becoming the big tourist season now, people coming through for summer, lots of foot traffic. Be nice if we could have that established and park your car, walk the whole thing, not have empty storefronts for, oh my gosh, Minot Park, July, what is it called? Oh my goodness, I've lived here 30 years and I totally blanked. I was thinking Winterfest, but that as well. And so I think everything everybody said is really valid and really a good goal to work towards. But the manufacturing piece, I know it's not in the downtown corridor, it's commercial, but I think that's a big piece to kind of establishing livability and moving forward, even with the moratorium when we're stuck.
Okay, the reason I kind of I really wanted to kind of have this consultant hired to kind of help us move through this, because I've had some experience with the Economic Development Board in the past, just kind of not very direct in the past. But my concern was that we did some plans and that was good, but we weren't very focused. And so that's kind of what I've also heard from a couple of the business folks that had been on the Economic Development Board in the past, was that we kind of tended to kind of go here on one meeting and the next meeting we're talking about something totally different. And so I really want to be able to kind of come up with, what can we do in the short term? Let's kind of identify those actions and start getting those on the docket to get implemented. And then what's the longer term stuff that's going to take, 6 months to 18 months, and then the much longer stuff. So for the short term, and giving some input, feedback back on your what you provided for us, John, is instead of doing surveys for these long-term vacancy spots, I really want to see somebody reach out personally, because I don't think that those people are just going to respond to a survey. I don't think, most people do. They're too busy or whatever. So really doing that personal touch of kind of getting a hold of them and talking to them about what their long-term plans are, what are their barriers, what are their needs, that kind of thing, really personal touch. And then, just talk to them about, hey, we need, we want to see these kind of get filled, because they do affect all the other businesses around. And, ultimately, we do have some stronger code enforcement that's been mentioned. We don't want to go there unless we have to, but that's the ultimate outcome if we can't come up with something in the short term. There's also these newer vacancies like Sandy Auto Body Shop and the Next Adventure and things like that are fairly fresh. And then reaching out to these desired businesses, like you all said, Hans and those folks, what are the desired businesses that we can put in there? Like, can we get another outfitter guide type business in the Next Adventure and all? The thing that was, again, also another short-term, pretty easy to do, is getting these big banners up there so that people know what's in Sandy. Here's a picture of Johnson Viewpoint. Here's a picture of the new park. Here's a picture of Tick Creek. Here's a picture of the splash pad. Here's a picture of, whatever. All the things that we want people to know about Sandy. And that's where those wayfinding signs come in. It's like, if you don't know where they are, then it doesn't, you really want to kind of, when they see those pictures, they're like, hey, I want to go check that out. Oh, turn left on Meinig and you're going to be at the new park. So really kind of doing that wayfinding signs in a way. And we've had some, but they're not very visible. They're so neat, Sandy style, they kind of just blend in. I don't know if they need to be bigger, but we need to kind of have somebody design them who knows how to design a sign that will attract automobiles going by at 30 miles an hour. The other thing I think short-term is looking at food carts at the Cedar Park and board and bike rentals down there. Those are things that don't require ERUs. So I'm really, excited about kind of, again, leveraging our economic development at that site. Christina mentioned the road fabrication. Didn't we already approve porta potties for that site in the short term?
No, we haven't approved anything.
We're waiting on an ordinance.
So, which has been brought up a few times, just to note for the council. So Kelly, I believe the planning commission is going to look at it. Let me just to note the schedule.
Oh, okay, because I thought that was the only thing we did kind of approve was the.
No, the only thing that was approved on that site was a zone change from I-1 to I-2, maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
I think it was in 2020, actually, during COVID. And then unfortunately, when Mr. Gambino tried to move forward with the actual design review and building, we were in the moratorium. So at this point, he's just waiting for us to adopt the alternative treatment ordinance, which I will be bringing before the planning commission on June 30th and the city council on July 21st. So if that's passed, then that will give him a path
Yeah.
forward to put
Yeah.
porta potties in or.
Yeah,
Something
that's kind of where, okay, I'll follow up on that. And then, but you know, I know one of the things that to consider is that some of these, you know, short-term things are pretty big investments. If you're talking about sewer septic systems and all that. And so we also have the 190 ERUs that we're scheduled to get in, you know, less than 2 years. I've heard, you know, 1 year, I've heard a year and a half, and I've heard 2 years, so pick your number. But, you know, that's, I think, the opportunity for getting, you know, again, it's kind of it's a middle term goal that what do we want to kind of get done with our economic development goals with those ERUs that are going to come available, because I can't imagine, you know, it's going to take at least probably a year to get any new businesses in here. So I don't think they're going to want to have to, you know, pay for a septic tank and all that, and then turn around within 2 years and hook up to the sewer. So that's, and they are required to just hook up to the sewer as soon as it's available. So those are some of the short-term things. The longer term, again, is like has been said, it's just with Bell 362nd, how do we influence what we get there? I don't know how exactly you do that. I know there's, you know, reaching out to certain businesses, there's brokers and things like that. And then lastly, kind of, again, more longer term, is the downtown walkability and pedestrian safety. And some of this stuff, it's like Rich said, it doesn't, you know, the urban renewal stuff and all these other things kind of come together and they all overlap with other departments and other areas. But I think it really does help to kind of make these efforts that we're doing as open as possible and get all sorts of ideas, because none of us is smart as all of us. So I really want to hear all the things that you want to do. I do want to focus us on the short-term stuff at first so that we can get that rolling and then quickly, you know, move to the middle term stuff and get that done. So we've got this a consultant contract for 2 years, thankfully. So we fully funded the contract for 2 years. So I think we've got the time that we need to do do it right and get things rolling right away and keep rolling. So make some progress on this.
Can I ask a question of the council? What is the feeling of the Pleasant Street master plan that we have and we developed? Are we,
POA,
what's that?
dead.
That's what I want to know. I mean, is it just dead and are we not talking about it anymore, or are we using it to, I mean, because there's all, you know, we've had it in the past for economic development.
It's a very fair question. And it's something that I feel like we keep kind of dodging and not answering, but I mean, I'm kind of with Dawn on that. Like, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of traction for that to move forward and a lot of that.
Only my third year, we haven't
wrong.
talked about it once. So,
I only bring it up because there's a lot of, you know, should we put our energy in certain areas? We've heard a lot of that. The Pleasant Street Master Plan was one of those in the past, and it could be in the future, but if it's not something of the will of the
If economic
council.
development came back and said that was vital to accomplish our overarching goals, we will look at it. Absolutely. Right now, there's no compelling driver for it.
Well, there's one compelling driver for it, which is the council did add to their council goal list for 25-27 to revisit the Pleasant Street
To
master
figure out
plan.
what we're gonna do with it.
Rely on consulting. So,
But I mean, it was to figure out what we're going to do with it, whether anything or not, right? Because it is.
I think there are, you know, maybe some safe routes to schools and all that, but the master plan had millions of dollars, as I recall, you know, basically putting in sidewalks and expecting and, you know, redoing the paving and stuff, and then expecting businesses would just kind of come. And
We missed a
it was a
window
little
with
bit of a.
leathers being sold. We missed a window there that could have made a big change.
Missed a lot of windows.
Yeah, so.
Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean
It's a fair
to
question.
bring up a sore wound there, but that was part of it too, so just was curious.
I live on Pleasant Street. I see it.
Well, I think until we get the empty stores on the court
Yeah.
filled and done. That has to be our priority. And then once that happens, it's gonna trigger a Pleasant Street review. And I'll just, real quick, last thing, I always bring it up whenever I can. I hate blight. And if, I don't know how much money is in urban renewal, and this is a longer term plan, but I'm gonna keep pushing it. Like he tells his sock story all the time. I'm gonna say this, so. If we could get the power lines underground through town, it looks horrible. And it's amazing the difference. If you look at cities that have drive-through highways and they put it underground, it's amazing the difference it makes. And I've never understood why all that money was spent on Proctor to have nice sidewalks and streetlights and trees and everything, and it didn't happen on Pioneer. So it's like lopsided on one way or the other. Both sides should be the same and get power lines underground. I think it would help the image tremendously.
When did you move here?
Well, I've been coming through Sandy my whole life, but lived in town since 16. I lived just out of town since.
Guys, when I moved
Oh, wait.
here,
20 years
the
ago.
difference between when I moved here and now, the number of lines going back and forth across the street is remarkable.
It's the ones that go right with parallel. There's one on Proctor,
It used
there's,
to go every direction.
Yeah,
across
there's-
and-
We undergrounded the communication lines, not the power lines.
Yeah.
And well, local power lines they did.
Not going
if
on.
you go out there and look, it's up Proctor, it's up Pioneer, and it's
Yeah.
down the middle in between two. There's like
So,
three of them.
It looks a
all.
lot better than it did, but it
And it
wasn't.
was a major expense at the time.
I am just saying, keep it on the radar.
Anybody else for last
Yes.
comments? Okay, Don.
Sorry, I didn't know we were doing one round when you were cutting off last time. So two things. First of all, I want to go back to the branding, just note, Stan, former mayor, me, and I don't know who else, we kind of coined that term, Old Barn District. I don't know if that sticks, but we do need to, when you drive into town, that's the first thing you see, Old Barn.
It's beautiful.
And it could be a focal point someday. Don't know if that's in the future, but I'd love to see that explored. The second thing is, as your Councilor Hanley was talking about signage and integration, there are signs going up around Bell Street as part of that development. There were some requirements to put certain signs on there. It'd be nice to, if somehow they all kind of tied together in some way. And then I want us to really, I've been harping on this, but the idea of, as a city, figuring out, staff especially, figuring out how we find a way as opposed to presenting the barriers of why things can't happen. And you guys have heard me talk on that. And I think you talk about it a little bit on that industrial land development slide where you say provide landowners with engineering support, permitting guidance. I'd like to see that strengthened, that if you're a targeted business that we want, that we bend over backwards to get you in here. And to that end, is rogue manufacturing important to us, council? I'm curious, do you think rogue manufacturing is an important business for us as the city? I think it should be on your report every week on where that application is. Because if it's important to us and we don't know what's happening, we couldn't even remember that we haven't passed the ordinance yet.
We've talked
So-
about it so much and because I'm in such support of it in my head, we'd already done it, so.
Right. So I think we have to put those things that are important to us on a list, and you gotta hold us accountable to doing what we can and your staff to do what they can. Because time is money for these guys. An ordinance, we're not even gonna give them a decision for 2 more months, Okay. Okay, that's it. I'm done. Thanks. So box off.
Okay, well, we're gonna continue to talk about this. We are gonna schedule our economic development advisory board meeting. With kind of the discussions we've had tonight, start focusing in on some of these things. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, well,
One more thing. Jeremy, did you run here? You didn't make a running comment. I just wanted to note that.
Are you still
For
doing
our
that?
next meeting, man. I didn't know if you were doing that.
Every
or just
morning,
stopped.
this
Okay.
morning, yeah.
I know Sandy that evening.
Come on, I'm half retired here. You guys. I've seen it, he said, every week for what, 4 weeks now?
That's good seeing you again.
Yeah.
John, do you
Anyway.
have any other?
I just want to follow up, a couple of things that, Councilor Sheldon said and that, Jeremy said that, filling these vacant properties, and I agree with you, Mayor, the one-on-one's gonna take a little hand holding, and we're gonna have to, each one's gonna have some different characteristics as we find that out, but I think as a city, and you know, I love the idea where you're going with branding, you look at sisters in different cities that have done a really good job at branding, but backfilling these spaces, right? I think that business recruitment strategy is so important to be able to have this board think about like, who is that target market that we're gonna go? And to the same point, what Council Sheldon talked about, that you're aligned with that. So, you know, just something to think about. Maybe it's a quarterly or, you know, check in like a work session with the. It's important when you're out there in the community and you have, even if we put together a simple pamphlet that, you know, if you're at IDC, the major retail brokers, or if you're having a meeting with someone from Business Oregon, or you're sitting with a broker, that you as the council and the mayor know also what these business owners are, and there's a pathway there, because the staff will, here's the pathway to get there, but that clear messaging will help backfill these vacant properties. And it's gonna be maybe more organically type of people that we're gonna be looking for, you know, and as those fill, then you're gonna see more regional players wanna come maybe for your Pleasant Street, but just, I think that's important that you have this dialogue, and that you have a brochure or something to be able to go, that you all carry in your truck or your car, and you're able to, if you're sitting there at some convention, you're able to hand that out, or if some talking to someone. That's important to be able to know that pathway is in your city. So just putting that out there to think about. So.
I was of that same kind of concept. I was thinking, you know, trying to have us try to reach out, you know, we have a huge benefit with Sandy Net here. And
Absolutely.
all those folks that work from home, they can live anywhere.
I brag about it every
That
day.
marketing
Yeah.
of those, you know, folks that move to Sandy and work from home, and
Mhm.
here's what, you know, view of Johnson Viewpoint, here's, you know, and Mount Hood and skiing and hiking and all that. And we can bring more those in-home businesses here in Sandy.
Yeah.
In the existing housing that we have.
And I think it's just healthy conversation if you did something like this quarterly, because you're just, here's the business marketing strategy we have for the vacant parcel, right? And then you're like, oh, okay, we understand this. This is what it is. Let's get this on some paper and let's get it out to the market, right? So, but that alignment, I think, is really helps, you know, just from a marketability, because it takes the whole community to backfill these spaces, you know, a lot of different property owners there. So thank you.
Yeah, just one thing quickly, something for you guys to think about at your next meeting also. The entire time I've been on council, not nearly as long as Jeremy, but the same buildings have been vacant. We've been talking about the same derelict buildings with absolutely no teeth and no traction. And so discuss maybe creative ways, but also like solutions that you think are reasonable. Because I'd like to not have the same conversation 2 years from now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the plan. Okay, good. Thank you. Let's, thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Get your full glove. Costco's back.
Okay, we got, two contracts here. Let me get through those pretty quickly. The next thing on the agenda is the Sandy to Portland transmission, main contract for the Bull Run Supply Pump Station, Portland Pipeline. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Is AJ doing that?
It's AJ.
Yep. Yes, okay, hi.
AJ,
He was hiding in the back.
Yeah, I need some moral support today, so.
You want to introduce that staff?
What's that?
I'm gonna introduce that staff you brought.
Right in the back here, we've got Piper, if you'd like to stand up.
No. You will?
Nope. And Jocelyn, she'll stand up. Nope.
Wow, you're shy.
All right. There's Danny.
That's pretty bold of you guys to come out and sit through a council meeting.
Oh,
So
yeah.
well done.
They needed
And
it.
boring for them.
I'm sure.
All right, well, before you this evening, we've got the contract award for the Sandy to Portland transmission supply line. I'll let AJ go into the details, but you know, my brief overview is that this is an important step into finishing the work that we need to complete to ensure that we have a backup water source. We have some favorable news with the contract amount compared to what we had built into the budget, but I'll let AJ shed some additional light on that. This is in direct alignment with Council Goal 7.2 to progress the construction of the Portland Filtration Transmission System to near completion. And with that, AJ, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, so with a few new council members on the board since we originally approved the design, I just want to go through basically the general process that got us to this point we're at now. We have an existing connection to Portland today. We've signed a bilateral compliance agreement that the water from Bull Run needs to be filtered. The location that Portland has for a filtration facility, as you all know, is down at Proctor and Bluff, or that rough location there. With that being said, instead of buying land, building our own filtration facility, we determined that the best choice for Sandy was to connect to this new filtration facility. That gives us their filtered water from Portland. It keeps us out of curtailment once we're connected to them. It gives us, most importantly, I think, the access to Portland's groundwater supply. So if there is some major event up on our hill here and both of our water sources are affected, we still have the chance to get water from Portland's groundwater supply. Since the time we started design, we've actually broken this project up into 3 separate portions. Portion 1 is the meat of the whole project, which is the pump station that will be on site there. Section 2 is this pipeline that we're talking about today, and section 3 is the dechloramination that will take place at Revenue Reservoir.
It's wet.
Dechloramination that'll take
right,
place
yeah.
at Revenue Reservoir, keeping free chlorine in our water. So with this project, we had a bid that was about $1.6 million lower than what our engineer's estimate was. We received 10 bids, which is fantastic for any project. 4 of those bids were in, if I remember correctly, about $7,000 of each other. So when we're talking dollars of this size, it shows that we are getting good numbers out of our low bid here.
How much lower was this one from the median there? Significantly or?
No,
Okay.
no, our highest bid was an outlier. I want to say 3.5. I should have that friend was there about that. So today we are looking to start this part of the project, get this pipeline in place, and then with it in place, we can focus on, most importantly, our pump station and our dechloramination site. The important factor for getting this done now is that it will not have a chance of holding up the other 2 portions of this project, which rely, of course, on having a line to transmit water so that they can be started up again. At the moment, I know that the filtration facility is on hold due to land use. We feel that now is an important time to continue with this work. We are in a fairly uncertain time. We know what this is going to cost. We know how long it's going to take, and we should be able to get it done in time. And with that, finally, the bid price that we received for this, as you've seen, is $2.687 million, and it'll be coming from our full faith and credit bond. And with that, if there's any questions from the council?
Do we have, and I feel like I know the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Do we, if the filtration plant doesn't move forward, we spend all this money to do all this, do we have any type of guarantee with anything, or is there a mechanism or an opportunity for us to partner with them at another capacity, or?
So for the time being, for this particular contract, the writing on the wall will be clear in the near future here. And that gives us a chance. We have in our contract language the ability to cancel this particular contract, and it'll end with whatever cost we have spent so far at that point. There is a lead time on pipe, which means that we are not going to be digging tomorrow. We've got a little bit of time that allows us to see what's happening and make a decision. So we won't be sunk too deep by the time we can see what's happening with that project.
Perfect, thanks. And land use, June 20th?
25th.
25th
is when their decision time is, so.
The short answer is Portland doesn't have a plan B and we don't either.
I know this.
Okay.
I want to hear it.
Yeah.
So.
She's offering softballs. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I didn't see in the contract the provision to cancel. I saw a delay, but I didn't see cancel.
So the contract's very large. It's actually in one of the linked documents there, and there is termination for convenience as well as termination for cause. And so this would be under the termination for convenience clause in the contract.
Then I apologize for reading too much stuff. I don't know what 6.3 is trying to say. Can you explain that to me?
Off the top of my head, no, I cannot.
Consent of surety. Josh?
I'll pull it up here.
Says the owner will make final payment or return or release retainage at final completion or any other time unless contractor submits written consent of the surety to such payment, return, or release.
It feels like it's missing a word, or maybe I just don't understand the concept. Anyway, I read it and I was like, it seemed odd.
Never used one in a contract yet, so. I pulled it up.
6.3. Yeah, we need to get there.
Any other question while Josh?
Yeah.
looks at it? You know, sit beside it.
That's my last one.
I had a couple comments. I know that they won't be starting, break ground or anything until after the decision is made on the treatment plant. But I would want to make sure because our contractor's doing this, whereas, Portland and those guys are all kind of coordinating with the surrounding property owners. I want to make sure that we are part of that outreach to the property owners, especially when it comes to paving Luff Road. They're going to have to do repaving. There's a lot of talk and questions about whether they can close a lane during, the busy 7 to 8, 9 a.m. section, all that kind of stuff. Just making sure that everybody out there is aware of what the plan is when it comes. So,
Of course,
yeah, just make sure that we're doing our.
and to
good
that
outreach.
point, we do have traffic control approval is not directly through us, it's through Clackamas County as it's their road. We intend to coordinate with the property owners in that area once we get closer to having a construction schedule lined out that we can rely on. As far as times of work and everything, we will do what we can to coordinate best with the city and people around it, so.
Okay, and that will run filtration, update stuff that they have on everybody's phones and all that. It's a pretty good way to just get the word out. So hopefully we're gonna be passing the information on through there. So, good. Oh,
Any luck, Josh?
Yeah, I think the word not is missing.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay,
Owner will not make fun of him.
that made more sense to me. Okay.
can you note that?
I will note that. Thank you.
You're
I'm not
welcome.
sure where the knot goes, but.
Owner will
I will
not.
proofread all your comments.
Thank you, Don.
No.
We're ready for a motion?
And Tyler will have.
I
the
move to
rest of
authorize the city manager to execute the construction contract with N8 Holman Incorporated, DBA N8 Excavation for the transmission main portion of the Portland to Sandy water filtration system. You guys could have made this longer project in the amount not to exceed $2.687 million.
As amended.
As amended, thank you.
I will
'Cause
second.
I need more words.
Yeah, add a few more in there, why not?
Thank you. Counselor Smallwood has made a motion and Counselor Ramsayer has seconded the motion to authorize the city manager to execute this contract. All those in favor, vote aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
AJ.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
While AJ is slowly walking away, I'm gonna just say, thank you to him for stepping into the public works director role and keeping us on schedule and on task and bringing these contracts timely to make sure that we're.
Under budget.
Yeah,
Yes.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We did make the right choice there.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, good evening.
Next on the agenda, we have another contract for the transit contractor selection. And go ahead and kick that one off.
Well, I'll be brief again and just turn it over to Andy in just a moment, but as you know, Andy's department provides excellent transit services through the help of a contracted firm to actually hire the drivers. We own the buses and we employ the sort of administrative staff, Andy, a director, and then we've got the transit manager and an administrative assistant. But everyone else is contracted. Every 5 years, we go through an RFP process to ensure that we're getting the best bang for our buck. Andy has completed that process and we've got a new contract before you this evening. And with that, I'll turn it over to you and you can walk through what you did, how we got here and where we're going.
Absolutely. Good evening. So as Tyler said, for procurement requirements, we go out every 5 years to make sure that we are indeed using our money wisely. We started the request for proposals in January of this year. We got 3 proposals from 3 vendors and we interviewed all 3. We put together an evaluation committee of 6 people, very good committee. Well-rounded, 2 of us from our department, Ryan Wood with Public Works, because we share a building and so they work with them every day. And then we also had Christina Babcock from Clackamas County, who oversees Mount Hood Express and Village Shuttle. We had someone from the Canby Transit Agency, and we had, and this is a new part that I'm really excited about. We had Chris Alexander, who's a Sandy resident and on our board. He's also a supervisor for TriMet, so he brings and drives, so he brings the operator perspective that we in the past honestly haven't had during this process. So if you didn't look at the scoring matrix, please do, because when you see all of us on the committee, we were all right in the same scoring range, which I always find fascinating when that happens during an RFP process. This particular company who we gave the intent to award, and RTW is what they're called. They were new. They were new to us. They are newer. They are a lot smaller than MV, who we currently have. And they've kind of, the president of the company, the president/owner, comes from a finance world, and they have found a niche in small agencies and being able to really bring a smaller corporate size for small agencies like ours. He actually did an interview that's very interesting, that he talks about we can treat people better than the big corporations do. And so that really came across in their interviews. They also have more technology approach. They keep all of the reports in the cloud, so they have access to our data. We always have access to the data. We send, we upload the data, they put it in the format that we have agreed upon, in the beginning, or what we want, they send it back down. And so there's a lot of exciting things about this corporation that I look forward to. I'm also not gonna lie, every 5 years, I get very nervous at this process. So in the RFP, you'll see one of the things that we really focus on is how they will treat our MV's current employees, because those drivers who are wonderful, we have great people who represent us every day. It's really hard to get a new employer every 5 years. And there's things that you don't think about them going through, such as, they're going to have a probation period with their new employer. They're going to have new supervisors brought in because they're going to bring in a new GM, probably, looks that way. Because ours currently is with MV and she's probably staying with MV. She hasn't said for sure. They also will end up in that probation period. There will be an insurance period before the other insurance, just things that are really scary for people who are living everyday life. And so one of our requirements is in the RFP is always that they are kept whole. They, money-wise, they either get the same or better. Insurance benefits, same or better. So all of that has been worked through, and I will say that as soon as they got an intent to award and touched base with me, they flew their main corporate out just to say hello, meet all of the drivers. They interviewed them or chatted with every single driver one-on-one to introduce themselves. So hopefully you're going to approve this contract tonight. The really great part that I haven't said out loud yet is they're also about $11 less than if we had gone with the contractor that we currently have. And we try, there is a component cost was part of our scoring, but it was only 20 points out of the 100. It wasn't the final decision. And they do bring all of the things with their contract that we currently have, such as dash cameras, the ability to manage our cameras on board, They have already recommended some differences in, fleet maintenance software, et cetera. So hoping that this contract is approved. If so, then they come on board July 1st of this year.
Andy, could you touch on just briefly to the benefit of the way this contract is structured as opposed to MV with Clackamas County?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have worked with Clackamas County, and Clackamas County has worked out of the city of Sandy since 2013. They have run Mountain Express, and a little before that, they were running the village shuttles to Rhododendron, and the city of Sandy has always charged them rent, but also just a great collaboration. We have slowly started to oversee more of the day-to-day because we're on the ground and they're not. And we've made sure to be compensated for that. So you've seen, we've added an employee back in 2016 that really spends a lot of that employee's time on Mount Hood Express and making sure that things are operating as they should. But one of the things that I noticed in the way our contracts used to be is that we had these separate contracts. And so when it would come time, so this contract will be good for 2 years, and then we will have the option to renew it every year after that. Well, that became like a 3-headed monster negotiation process every time. And I found that I spent what I considered too much time going between our contractor and the county to get us to the next contract. And so in this particular contract, we will act as a pass-through for Clackamas County, and we will hold this contract. So we will have the ability to make the decisions. Of course, we will always include the county. They're a very strong, great partner for the transit system. And they wholeheartedly support this process because it just keeps everything seamless. We are on the ground. We know what's happening. We work with the contractor in our facility every day. They don't. So they really do like to kind of have our advice and technical expertise, and we pretty much run the show.
Question on that. How come they're paying like $10 more?
Their service is more expensive to run. It is because they're on a mountain. They end up buying cleats for the drivers. They end up buying winter jackets. They quite often will have people quit in the winter, and they'll have to fly people into town for a month at a time to work here, who they have to pay extra because they have a contract they have to uphold. So it is a more expensive service to run. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, a few questions. The first one, relative to the protest,
Yeah.
can you just characterize what the protest was around?
They, yeah,
MV protested.
MV protested. That's not uncommon.
Sure.
Yeah. And so a couple of things. One of the things is we put in there that you could have points for being a DBE, a disadvantaged business enterprise. So they did include that they would buy their uniforms, I believe, using a DBE. As a group, after reading the proposals, we decided that the fairest way to score them all is, are you a DBE or not? Sort of like, are you a veteran or not? And if they were, they got 5 points, and if they weren't, they got 0, because all of them said, we'll use a DBE somewhere. And so just to be fair, we went with that. So they said, you didn't give us points. And we said, you were all treated the same. And you all would have gotten points the same. And even if you had gotten all the points and nobody else got the points, you still weren't first.
Okay.
Their other reasonings were that they don't believe that this company can meet our needs at this rate.
Okay, it's a
Yeah.
fair point,
Fair point. Yeah,
because if they can't, then we'll be hurting in a year.
that's absolutely true. However, I believe the business model is very different. Their references were wonderful, and we have MV had this rate not too long ago. So
Okay. Thanks.
You got it.
How long was MV the contracted?
This is their 5th year, so we had a 5-year contract with them.
And then before that, how long were you contracted with the company before that? I'm just trying to.
Jody Reduce before that.
Oh, that's
Well,
right.
before that, we had a really rough 8 months when the city brought them in-house because we had a contractual relationship end sort of unexpectedly, I guess is a fair
Yeah.
way to say that.
Mhm.
So we had a real short stint in-house, and then, gosh, 19 years with.
Well, actually, Roadjoy was our contractor prior to MV and prior to the city switching. Yeah, that he just explained. But, and Roadjoy was our contractor. I believe, I don't know that we hit the 5-year mark with Roadjoy. The woman who owned Roadjoy was the supervisor and ran the service for 10 years.
That was
And then
Jody, right?
that was Joyce.
Joyce, sorry.
Yes, Joyce.
Jody was the son, my bad.
Joyce Ledoux.
I was a
Yep.
scoutmaster.
Yes, so Joyce ran a nonprofit, ran SAM for a nonprofit that was called Wheels, and they probably had the contract for 10 years
Yeah.
at least. And actually, I think our first contractor was Luxury Accommodations for a couple of years, if you guys know Luxury Accommodations. I think they were our first for a couple of years, then this nonprofit. So Joyce was there for, gosh, at least 15 years.
Thank you. I was just trying to get an idea of, when you started out talking about how scary it is for the employees to go through this. I was just trying to get an idea of how often they've had to go through this in the last.
The last 5 years have been a little scary. It was pretty rocky with MV the first couple of years, hence the long negotiations, this 3-headed thing that started happening. And it's scary for them.
Can I bring up a perspective on that as an employee or an agency that gets swapped out every few years and going through this process myself
Mhm.
just recently in December? When you force them to change employers on a time period that's different than their insurance, you effectively make them start over on all their deductibles. So it's actually a financial loss to an employee. And it's one that rarely gets figured in by the people who make those decisions because it doesn't, you did not mention that in your list of the things that, and that's not uncommon. No one thinks about it. So I would strongly encourage future contracts to end on those insurance interval timeframes to make that easier on employers.
We could do that. Oh, thank you.
And even to the point of, it's probably too late to delay at this point, but had I advised a couple of months ago, I would have suggested waiting until the year end to make that even smoother. But
There's no other questions. Can I get a motion?
no, there's more questions.
I actually have something to bring up, maybe perhaps for Jeff. In the suggested motion language, there is a typographical error. It says RTS Management LLC instead of RTW. That's probably something that we should.
Well, they're right next to each other on the keyboard.
Well,
That's,
I
Good
missed
catch,
that.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for that.
you're welcome.
There's a schedule of implementation that's 2 or 3 months late already. Does that matter as far as this contract or no?
no. We will be ready by July 1st. As I said, they already flew out, and when they met with each driver, they
Okay, so
considered
April
that.
Start is considered what
Yep,
they're actually doing.
yep.
All right.
Yeah,
And the second question then for you, Josh, is there an indemnification clause? Because I only saw the insurance requirements. Is that enough? Is that protection for us as a city when we have a contractor?
They have a termination for convenience too, clause that I read in there.
mhm.
So I wasn't the one who reviewed this contracts.
I'm sorry.
That up now for you.
Okay. I didn't mean to put you on the spot on that one.
I would assume there would be.
And then under employee retention, under 19.1, it talks about a $400 monthly bonus. I didn't see that referenced anywhere else, and it seems confusing in terms of, is that a one-time or an every month bonus or
So one of the attachments will have driver's wages. So the driver's wages will be included in that $400 monthly bonus will be listed. So that goes back to when it was a smaller company, they were being paid for insurance. And when we pulled them in-house, we were covering it through a monthly stipend. And then when MV took over, MV agreed to give them the option to have this monthly amount for insurance or to choose insurance. And then they realized legally, because of the timing and Affordable Care Act, they couldn't give them that choice. They had to provide them insurance. But they couldn't take away the $400 because they have to keep them whole of what they have been making. And so it's just been carried over. So those employees who have the $400 bonus, it is monthly. And it's been about 6 years now that that
I
has
just
happened
wanted to
for
make
them.
sure, because
Yeah,
So if somebody starts next week, do they get it too?
no,
Okay,
no,
so this is just for.
it's just,
Just for the
it's
existing.
just to
Who
keep
have
them
more
whole.
experience and all that.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was.
all right, that was it for me. Just
Bottom of
identification.
page 136.
Subsection 10 or section 10 was the indemnity section.
Okay, all right, somehow I skipped over that. I appreciate it.
And you done?
I just note that the table under 11 has some weird formatting. It threw me.
Is that the insurance?
Yeah,
Yeah, it, mhm.
So the table under 11 has some weird formatting.
the line's not where it should be. It took me reading it like 5 times to figure out that these two are different. So like the last row is not really, it's part of that fine.
Let's get this motion, please.
Can I make a motion, Don? All right,
You're rambling, Wilkinson.
I move to authorize the city manager to sign the personal services contract between the Sandy Transit Department and as amended RTW Management LLC.
I will second the motion.
I have a motion from Councilor Shelton and a second from Councilor Ramsayer to authorize the city manager to sign personal services contract for the Sandy Transit Department and RTW. All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good job.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Andy.
Andy.
Thanks.
Ready for me?
Yes, sir.
All right.
City manager.
So just a few things for you this evening. First, I wanted to just say thank you, not only to the two officers that were here earlier today, for their recognition, but just the entire police department as a whole. They do great work, and I think there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that doesn't really get publicized or talked about. This was an example of one of those this evening, but just wanted to give them a quick shout out. Also, thanks to all of you, as well as the budget committee members again for your work through the budget process. Lots of late meetings and lengthy discussions, but it's an important process and we're grateful to be on the tail end of it, but thank you for your involvement. We're closed next Monday for Memorial Day, which is hard to believe that it's Memorial Day already. I don't know if anyone else is struggling with the way the calendar is moving, but that caught me off guard this morning, actually. The mayor and I have a meeting later this week with Maria Pope from PGE to talk about ways that we can continue our relationship and how PGE can further support our community. So we'll follow up on how that conversation goes once that's occurred. And then later,
Like putting power underground?
I don't think they're gonna spend $10 million to do that, but we can certainly ask.
Make sure you thank them for separating out the Cascadia from the.
Oh, we've
Make sure that they're appreciative of
Yep.
that.
we've passed on those acknowledgements before. We can do that again, certainly. Got 2 bid openings this week. So on Thursday, we're opening bids for Deer Point Park. So I'll have information on Friday, at least some preliminary information on Friday for you as to how those numbers come in. And then also opening bids for the effluent pump station work on Thursday. So might not have the whole picture on Friday in my weekend update, but certainly some preliminary information on how numbers are shaken out at the get-go, and hopefully everything is on track and continuing to go forward smoothly. I do have one other thing. Did you get my, so, AJ had some kids here tonight who didn't want to participate in the public process, right? My soon-to-be 9-year-old has taken up just designing city amenities. And so I just wanted to share a quick photo of a park he designed, which actually has pretty much an element of almost every park in Sandy. There's basketball courts and pump tracks and a gazebo and bathrooms and parking. And so this is what we talk about at home. It's maybe not what all of you talk about at home with your children, but dinner table talk is schoolwork.
Park design.
Park design, yeah, I mean, this week was park
A
design.
drinking station.
So I don't know,
That's cute.
it warmed my heart and also made me concerned of how much I talk about work at home maybe, but it warmed my heart that he, sees what I do and was able to translate that into an assignment at school and brought it home, so.
Well, we have a park director.
I know, right? I don't know if 8, almost 9 is too young, but
It'll work for me.
I'll take an extra salary at home, so. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Don?
We had a Senate meeting this week, Senate board meeting, went there and, I was on that founding committee. And then Jeremy's been on it pretty much consistently ever since. We had our first public person show up to that meeting in like 20 years now, so. Janet Davis, I think, from the Lower and CPO came. So it was like, cool, I applauded, but that board, I really am impressed with that board. They're all very in tune to SandyNet and they're, for the most part, they're power users. Those people we talked about that moved to Sandy to work from home, a lot of those people are fall in that category. So anyway, it's a good board. I do want to talk about Austin and I understand what you said, Mayor, about, it's not on the agenda and things, but is there something that we could do to help this effort that wouldn't take too much time, cost too much? And I'm not sure that directing money to them is the right thing, might be. Is there something we could do even through our Parks and Rec to funnel money or to assist?
My concern about this is that we have a process where we have the service,
Special service
social
contract
service
program.
contracts. And there's a lot of, there's the Sandy Kiwanis, there's the Chamber with the Mountain Festival program. I mean, the Sandy Mountain Festival and then the Music Fair and Feast, and there's a lot of different events being held by a lot of different organizations out here. And we have the service contract process. If we want to develop, add to that with, this kind of an event type stuff, that's fine. We just need to kind of have a process. I'm not comfortable handing out $15,000 of city money where, 2 weeks before an event, when I don't even, so I did kind of look up and see what the previous notes were, and the last, it said, I just looked at the notes from the meeting and it said, spoke on behalf of the Sandy Invitational Chainsaw Forest Fest event, which is entering its 3rd year, is continuing to grow. Over 3,000 people attended the last event. Mr. Ernest asked the city council for $15,000 in financial support for the 2025 event. He stated that support would allow for increased advertisement for the festival outside of town, driving further interest in commerce to local businesses. In response to council questions, he stated he would be developing the program over the next month and would return to the city with further details on what the proposed $15,000 would accomplish. A scholarship program dinner was also discussed. And then at the next following month's meeting minutes, the meeting minutes say, the city manager noted that Mr. Anesti has not yet provided additional information on the forestry event and his request for a financial contribution from the city. So I feel like we were pretty clear about we needed more information, and that was kind of much more timely. I think this was in February. I don't know what month it was, February, something like
February
that.
3rd.
Yeah, and so had we had, again, more process before the budget meeting and all that, I would be more open to it, but I'm not really excited.
Not disputing any of that.
Yeah.
Mayor, if you'll, I just want to know for the record, so there was an email, before the last budget committee, so a week ago, where he had expressed wanting to come to the budget committee And I did provide him the guidance that no, actually, the city council asked you to come back. So that's why he came to this meeting.
Right.
But I do want to know for the record, he tried to come to the last budget committee meeting. But I said, no, I think the council wants you to come to a regular meeting.
Well, and I'd like to add a little bit of, a little more to this discussion in that because he's dealing with so many department heads with his organization, he misunderstood the conversations that he had with various department heads over, permitting and various different things, and being told that he was okay, he didn't have to come before council. He interpreted that as he didn't need to come back before council.
It was for this part, not this part. huh?
Exactly. And so a little bit in his defense, he misunderstood.
But he did apologize for not doing what we asked him to do.
He did at the beginning tonight. He did, because
So he did understand.
he
We
understood.
did ask him for we asked him for something in writing.
No, he didn't. And because he called me last week and we had a conversation and I asked him to reach back out to those department heads and get clarification. And so he did that, and that's what brought him to ask to go, whether he could come before the budget committee. So he didn't understand, or was just confused. And I can understand, because a lot of things that we do can be confusing. So just adding a little.
And I appreciate, thanks. And
Mhm.
so I understand it's late in the game, missed the process and all that. That said, it sounds like it's gonna be a pretty big event.
It's huge.
Dick Hanna, looks like they're doing.
It's 2 days this year.
Major sponsorship.
Yep.
Of it in terms of their facility and
Mhm.
things. We just talked about economic development. The question is, should we have a city presence there at some variety? Whether it's as a fund provider, sponsor, or as a, should we even have a booth there? Should we have, maybe we're serving hot dogs there. I don't know. But we have a Parks and Rec department, Jordan again, director. Should they be involved? So I'm just wondering, in addition to just exploring, should we give them cash? Or maybe we buy a hot dog, then we go there.
It's May 31st and June 1st.
Yeah, it's like right around the corner.
He's grown it into a 2-day event in just 2 years, 3 years. This will be the third.
Actually, if I could remind everybody of something, we did discuss this further at a council meeting, because I think I brought the question up and you said you thought he was waiting until after the fundraiser to see if they got the funds. That was probably 6 weeks ago, maybe.
Or longer, it's been longer.
And in my meetings with Tyler, I've asked Tyler, have we heard anything from Austin?
Mhm.
Because, it's economic development, it's a boost for the community, but we're less than 2 weeks out now, and I just don't know how much advertising's gonna get. If he says it's online stuff, I don't know. $15,000 of online
It's
advertising.
14. He asked for 14, just to be clear. But, I mean, we don't have to give him full amount. We could give him a few thousand.
Well, I mean, how do we help this kid, right? I mean, that's.
I don't think we should give them a full amount. I think we should give them something.
I'm just confused at so are we gonna have all these organizations, Mountain Festival and the Fair and Feast and all those people should also, that's all economic development. And I'm fine with doing this if we have a process and criteria and an application and all that, but I'm not okay with giving out city money and then ask, I agree with all you, it'd be great to have the city involved in it. But am I gonna ask the Parks Department to work Memorial Day weekend, which is when it is?
So,
But
let's look at
let me
this. So
finish, okay, because
it's my report, but okay.
I just don't, I'm not okay with just, winging it here and having people come and ask for money with no details, not really anything hardly in writing, and expecting money from us. This is city budgets. We went through a budget process and we were very concerned about how much money got allocated to each department. And 14,000, 10,000, it's a huge amount of money, and I have no idea what he would do with it. And I'm just not okay with not having a process here. It just seems like it'd be illegal. I mean, I know that we've got some flexibility, I guess, but I would have trouble looking Chris Jones in the face and not, responding to her request for Mountain Fair and Feast or the Sandy Chamber. Those guys also deserve money. So
Tyler, we're not giving money to organizations in the past when they've asked us for assistance.
Not that I can recall. So my recollection, my understanding rather, is that's how the special service contract program was developed because the council, for lack of a better word, got tired of people coming to a public meeting and asking for money, and there was no criteria and no bounds to what that ask could be, and an upper limit, a lower limit, whatever. And so the special service contract program was developed maybe like 2014. So it's been as long as I've been here, longer than I've been here. And that really was intended to avoid situations like this.
And I've been on that board that looks at all those since it began,
Mhm.
because it was just kind of awkward that, you know.
I would add just that there's been, one or two exceptions to that, which were
Yeah.
COVID specific, right?
Right,
The
right.
chamber came in because they had such a significant funding shortfall, and so they requested some funding. That must have been 2020 or
It was
2021.
Yeah, I do
2020.
remember that.
That was
I
our
remember
protect-
But that was, I mean, we funded that with some ARPA money, or the first round of coronavirus relief
Mhm.
funds, CRF funds.
Mhm.
And then we did the small business grant program, which was to, offset costs of being shut to the public, right? So, yeah, I don't believe I can't think of an example of where we have funded a request in this capacity before.
And let me just be clear, I'm all about for next year's event, getting started early and clarifying, roles and responsibilities and funding and all that kind of thing. I think that, I'd love to help with that. I think this is a wonderful opportunity. I think that he needs to have some help planning it because I think, it's getting big enough. You just can't do
He's
that.
got a lot of help. He has an entire board.
Because I'm fussy and a detail person, I'm looking over the minutes from the February 3rd meeting where Austin spoke. He stated he would be developing the program over the next month and would return to the city with further details on what the proposed $15,000 would accomplish.
Oh, 50, okay. I thought he said 14.
So, I know he's doing a lot of things with a lot of different people, but
Within the city.
he understood that we expected some sort of clarification.
If you recall, he was very sick that night. when
Yeah,
did
he
present.
wasn't
He had
feeling
a
well.
mask on and
Yeah.
a bad cold, if you
Yeah.
remember.
I just want to throw out two things real quick. And the first thing is I hate bureaucracy, and this kind of feels a little bit like bureaucracy. And the other piece about it is that I'm with you, Kathleen. I'm very much for a process and going through a process. But what gives me pause is I would have, might be a hard no if this was a first year, something that just come down. Where this, I think, is this the second or third year?
Third year.
Third year,
Been
things
there
within the
before.
city
And Dick Hanna behind
that has grown. That is what's given me a little bit of pause. And the other piece that's giving me pause, and so I don't know I don't know that it's the right thing tonight, is even when he talks, I heard him say something about maybe some billboards in some big cities, but I never heard a plan for what the money would go for.
So I have a
And that's what we
suggestion.
asked
Please,
for.
I'm open for anything because I do want to support this,
So
so I
I-
think it's good.
And I concerned about, handing a large sum of money without those sort of details. But we could buy something. We could pay for the hot dog vendor, whatever, to be there.
Like a single aspect of it.
The
Yeah.
single aspect of it, we could contract it, pay for it, provide it. And then the money doesn't go through that other, and we can limit that to whatever we want. And honestly, I just make one more point. Don't we get like free gym memberships? So 4 years, I have not taken a free gym membership. That's gotta be worth a few hot dogs somewhere.
I just want to, we're setting a precedent. So are we willing to do, when Mountain Festival comes?
So
And when the Sandy Fair and Feast come, are we willing to be handing out city money for those events at the cost of our Parks and Rec or other departments, police, et cetera?
I think the precedent is that we review and evaluate every request and judge it on its own merits.
And then I think we also each get an individual vote for it.
Absolutely.
So the majority would have to win.
Yeah.
And Kathleen, to your point, if Mountain Fest did come and say, hey, we had this oversight and we needed this, I would vote for it. Because it's a long-standing tradition, and that's where I'm going with
Yeah,
this.
yeah, and I'm not saying we can't. What we've done, as I know for Mountain Festival is like we've provided all the toilet paper and the paper towels and the police and the trash stuff, that gets, because it's in the park and all that. This isn't in a park. I know they did ask for police presence on their permit. So they're getting that, I assume, I don't know if that's coordinated, it was on the permit. I don't know if that's been arranged.
So something he did last year too, just to throw, was he did a voucher system where certain restaurants partnered with him here locally in town for discounts when they went and bought food at those areas. So, I mean, he is also very much trying to be a good community partner and help with a lot of our local businesses. And again, he's grown this from one half day to a full day. Now it's 2 days. He's put they've put a lot of energy into this, and remember that the money that's gained from this, because I did go to the dinner, it goes back, it's trying to get kids involved in things like forestry and learn about careers that maybe they haven't thought about. And it provides scholarships for kids who otherwise wouldn't be able to attend some of these classes and things like that. So,
And Laura, if I'm off base, you tell me I'm off base and I'll take this whole point back.
I don't think you're off base. I mean, I can see everybody's point up here tonight,
Yeah, I mean, being a Sandy Kiwanis, I see what all they do with the Christmas basket program and all the, they give out, two huge boxes of food, turkeys, hams, bags of potato, fruit, everything, huge bags of toys for the kids.
They're also a national organization, Kathleen. They're a national level organization. They've got a lot of years, they have a lot of years of stuff. And
They don't get any funding at the national level. They do everything. They go around to Dick Hanna and all those other folks, just like every other organization does, and gets donations and things like that. They're not getting anything from the now, and most of those people are older than me, and that's, so. I see the Sandy Kiwanis doing, the Easter egg hunt and the Christmas basket stuff and all these other events. And I just kind of think I'm really concerned about not having a really clear process, because that's kind of what started this whole thing, was that every nonprofit around here was coming to, they all have great, good stories about economic development. It's the library, the museum, the chamber and all that. And so I just want to, it's kind of the floodgates. So I'm just telling you that I want to have some really clear criteria, because I don't believe it should just be, hey, I'm friends with Austin and so I want to give him money, or I think it's a great thing. Whereas,
I'll take offense to that, actually, because that's not what I'm saying at all.
I'm not saying that
Okay,
you're
then
friends
you
with him.
probably shouldn't have said that.
So I'd like to.
No, I'm not.
I'd like to wrap up my thought here. So if I can, Mayor, please. I understand where you're coming from, Mayor, and I would probably on many, many days align with you. In this particular case, I don't. I would like to make a motion, and we'll just put it to the vote and see. I would like to make a motion that we allocate $5,000 towards the SICC for the city to contract either directly with a service that can be utilized. That would be my ideal.
I just want to put a little pot. Is that even lawful?
Yeah.
Because I feel like
Right.
we're on, I feel like that's a
it's not
slippery
agenda
slope.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
So I'm gonna look to people that are smarter before,
Yeah.
but just before, John, before we go down that road. I
Share,
wanna make sure
Josh?
that-
That's good. Good, guys. I'll pause. I'll put
Thank
time
you.
out.
Make the motion so I can hear.
Okay, so I make a motion that we allocate $5,000 towards SICC, whether it's given directly or to them for their own use, or whether we contract something directly for use at the event. That's my motion. Do you want to hear a second before we go beyond that?
Okay, so it's not on the agenda.
So not being on the agenda is fine. Your agenda is supposed to be everything that you anticipated to discuss. And so if something comes up that you didn't anticipate discussing, you're allowed to discuss that and act on that. So the $5,000 directly allocated would be to
sponsor the festival.
To use, for use, for the SICC.
And the alternative would be that staff would procure a contract
On their
or a
behalf.
vendor to provide some service at the festival.
Correct.
Yeah, do we have time? to do-
Administratively, that's an absolute nightmare for me.
That's what I'm gonna say.
That's-
Do we have
which
time?
one?
Contracting with someone. I can cut a check if you want to cut a check for $5,000. I can cut a check.
Honestly,
I
let me
don't-
amend it, and let's just like 5,000. 5,000 to SICC, a charitable organization.
I would love to, I'm interjecting in the motion, I apologize. I would love to schedule a work session to talk about what we're doing the next time a request comes up, because this, I think, is going to put staff in a really difficult position on giving any organization or person that's requesting funds the appropriate process in which to do so.
And that's why we have the process in place to do it the proper channels.
And if that process should be shaken up, I'm happy to have a conversation about whatever. I think this is just, it makes it really difficult for us to do our jobs when someone calls us or comes in with the front door asking for funding, because now come to council and you might get something, but also wait for this other application program that opens up in June.
Mhm.
I don't know if I have
We
money in the
did this-
budget or not.
We did this on Sura the other, last year with the demo of that one.
The building, yep.
Because we allocate
Yeah.
$400,000 for grant programs.
So
within the
Tyler,
city
just
or
trying
within the
to be
agency.
creative, and obviously I expect you to be honest. So we have quite a bit of money in the council line item for various things.
Mhm.
How much carryover did we have between last biennium to this biennium?
For the council
For council,
specifically?
yeah, because there's all sorts of money in there for various different things. How much
Yeah, so you
carryover?
had 500,000 in your council contingency, 300,000 of that was allocated to the police department, so you've got about 200,000. And a small amount of change, I don't have the
Now,
exact
it's a
number.
question of, do we have the money?
No, I'm just thinking.
Okay, do
So
we have a
you
second
do
for
want
this
to
motion? I want to call.
Be clear about where the funds are coming from.
Yeah,
That would be part
and
of this.
that's why I'm
So
asking.
that's an
Mhm.
important question.
Mhm.
The other thing, the other reason that you typically have a process for something like this is to avoid allegations of cronyism, discrimination,
Yeah,
et
sure.
cetera, and how these funds
That's
are
what I'm concerned
about. So there is a level of risk in doing it ad hoc, that you get an allegation from somebody that gave it to this person and not to this person for some unlawful reason. That's just.
What I'm confused about is that they got $40,000 from this fundraiser. I'm kind of wondering.
Scholarships.
I understand that, but what usually happens is, yes, all the events that are held, Mountain Festival and the Kiwanis stuff, they all do these fundraisers and then they cover their costs and then the rest goes to scholarships. So if there were some costs needed to put this on, then you pay those and the rest, and you go and get more sponsors, corporate sponsors and all, and then the rest goes to the scholarships.
Not arguing the
So-
point, just think we should give them $5,000.
Okay.
Did we
Do we have-
deny anybody in our last grant scholarship thing? I feel like we did.
I believe we reduced an applicant, well, maybe that was self-induced reduction of what their award was, because they didn't apply with all of their.
Are you talking
I
about?
think,
location.
I think because we separated out the museum and the chamber, we were able to fund, I think. We were able to.
I
fund
think
all
you're
of
right.
it.
That sounds.
I
good.
thought we funded them both.
But we reduced something, but but we were
I
funded.
think that was one of the.
Well, I didn't think
applicants that
we
reduced it.
reduced, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought what the council decision was is that we funded the museum. And then we funded the chamber with the understanding that they would also help focus on economic development.
What I was trying to say, Councilor Smallwood, was that
I'm sorry.
we were able to fund the other 4 regular applications. Yeah.
Gotcha, sorry. Thank you, Judge.
If the council is going to do this, I suggest that maybe another thing that you make clear is that the reason that you're doing it outside your usual process is because there's a miscommunication and there's a time pressure issue. It doesn't give you the opportunity to go through that usual process. Then you're not going to just take all comers at city council meetings for these moving forward.
Okay, I'd like to make a new motion then. Whereas Austin, what's his last name, Ernesti, misunderstood our last direction and understanding that the SICC is into its 3rd year and growing rapidly with strong corporate sponsorship.
And whereas it is a good economic opportunity to bring people into Sandy and see Sandy, I move that we move $5,000 from our council budget under the general fund to Austin's 501c charity for that festival. And we do it as quickly as possible.
I'll second that.
All those in favor, vote aye.
I
Raise a hands, please.
See.
So 1, 2, 3, all those opposed, raise your hand. Motion fails. Okay. Thank you very much. I do want to work with Austin here. Let's try to kind of get something up. Let's start talking to these other folks that have these events. And, you know, like I said, I want to be fair, and equitable. So, thank you. Mindy, yes.
Chamber of Commerce, morning stuff is always great. Yeah, that's all I.
Planning Commission, I have that. I'm on the board next week. It's been a long time. I don't know, if we weren't 5 weeks into meeting, I'd probably be looking more forward to it. But it'll be interesting to see what's going on that end. The council and the Planning Commission are such different bodies that I kind of feel like whole when I see both sides. Also, I went to the Ant Farm fundraising event this last Saturday at Mount Hood Resort. With mainly in honor of Nupa, who is passing the torch over to, I believe, Kim Williams. Kim Wheeler, yes, and it was, I'd never met Nupa before. It was a great event. He brought in a Native American cultural dancer, and they performed, and him and his partner and several others in the tribe performed, and it was a really great event to kind of introduce people to exactly what they do. My husband went with me. He basically knew nothing about Ant Farm. And it was very detailed, and it was, Nupa's done great work, and so has everybody there. And it's just very impressive, the outreach that they have in our community. So I was really glad I went. It was a great experience. So I haven't been to Cedar Park since the last time, so.
It's been busy, let me tell you.
Usually I go and snoop, but I haven't been.
No swamp.
Nope. So that's it for me.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't able to attend C4 as I was well that day, so
Predisposed.
thank you. The one thing I'd like to bring up though is in reading these agendas for the noise exceptions. I know you guys have a lot on your plate, but I'm just curious, is that something that do every one of these really need to come to the council, or is there a criteria that we could develop so that you guys at a staff level could just approve this? And I mean, obviously, it's not a big deal, but it just seems like. What's that?
I said until a neighbor complains.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, though, that's neither here or there. So that's gonna happen whether we approve it or they.
Right.
Yeah, we'd have to
So-
change the code.
What's that?
It's in the code, so we'd have to change the code.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I don't know if there's value in doing that or if it's just better for it to come to us. I don't know. I know one more thing to your plate probably isn't what you're asking for.
I mean,
But it is pretty minor to come up here.
What's that?
It is pretty minor to come up here.
Yeah, I also believe in just empowering the staff just to make those decisions. And I think with clear guidance, it's very clear on what it is as opposed to the political decision of maybe I don't like the block party over there, so I'm gonna vote.
Everybody
for
likes
them.
our block party.
I don't know.
I wanna
I'm
go
sure
to
it's
the
great-
block
it's a great
party.
location.
Butt band.
Great location, but that's what I'm saying. I just think, I don't know, just something I noticed.
can I
Yes,
interrupt
sir.
you just briefly? I'm happy to look at code modifications, but I'd love to see if there's interest from the rest of the council to explore that before I spend any time modifying the code to bring it back. So
Yeah,
if there's
I-
a majority of you
I
that
don't
want to
know.
see it come before the council,
The code
I don't-
modification is to change it to be.
change the
approved by
process.
staff
Yeah,
And not here.
So the city manager could approve it.
yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be okay with
I'd
that.
be in support of it.
Makes
Okay.
sense here.
Great. Sorry to interrupt you. Just
No,
wanted
yeah,
to
that's-
get some
yeah,
good
that's
direction.
great.
Thanks.
And then I just want to explain my no vote a little bit since it's that I get to. Some of the logic is I 100% agree that this is a great program and it should go forward. And I'm happy that it is. I also think though, the staff concern is very enlightening, as well as there is a process. I think it'll go on, it'll be absolutely outstanding without the use of some billboards this year. And maybe a little more expensive hot dogs. And then next year, I would highly encourage them to be on the awards team. So that's where I said with that.
Be on what?
The grants
Oh,
awards.
right,
or
okay,
awards.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
On that note, do we reach out to people on that process or do we expect them to know out of thin air what that process is?
That's a great question. Do you know what David was doing previously?
Yes, he reached out to his cronies and not everybody.
Well, I think that council, I want to say maybe 2 cycles ago, provided directions to do.
To reach out
more
to people,
proactive
but he
outreach.
didn't.
Okay, well, we'll need to make sure that we do that.
I mean, firsthand knowledge of people he didn't reach out to that he should have.
So I guess in that, and again, I'm sorry, because I'm gonna add work. But if we could figure out, and maybe we could utilize the chamber to help or something. Who all of these local nonprofits are, and people who, so that they all get equal information and equal opportunity. And so that people know kind of what the process is, so.
We can reach out to the chamber to get that list. If any of you have contact information, email and name of nonprofit, please send them to Jeff or I.
And when the window comes up, let us know and we can reach out to our
Yeah,
contact.
I'm just wondering, a little bit why it's on us to share it with each nonprofit, why we don't just share it
No.
with the chamber for them to share it with.
Yeah,
the
I'm just saying,
nonprofits.
if you have contact information for a nonprofit that you're aware of, send it to me so we can make sure we reach out to them. Not
Not all
you
the
send the
nonprofits,
application,
yeah.
but to make sure that the chamber's
But if the
listing and our
nonprofits
listing is the
come,
same.
They will understand the process.
Well, and I don't know that the chamber has all the nonprofits either, so
They
I
don't.
think he's just trying to dot his i's. and
Well,
cross his
because
t's.
next year we're gonna have the same complaint that we didn't reach out to everyone, so
Yes.
trying to prevent that from happening. If you
Yep.
know of someone that
Yeah.
didn't get reached out to,
So-
please tell us so we can
Please-
reach out to them.
Please send out an email to the council asking us for any
Absolutely.
names and contacts of
Is
nonprofits we're aware of.
that deadline coming up? Because the proximity is really important to me, so I know how to reach out to them as well.
We have not opened the application process yet.
It's usually been a mid to late summer.
So it's coming up.
And I
It's
think
coming up.
there's a
It's after the
discussion that
budget
needs to be
season.
had before we open that to ensure that what we've been doing is still in alignment with the council goals, because I would venture to guess that it's not.
I'm gonna ask that we kind of get through this meeting because I know you guys want to get home.
So Rich asked me to attend C4 and there's not a whole lot to report. They had a presentation that was given on the bike path / walking paths that they're working on and creating throughout Clackamas County. They didn't even have a quorum, so they didn't vote on anything. It was literally just the presentation.
Where were the paths? Were they anywhere out here on this end? or
There's some
were
up
they-
in Gebby, but nothing here through town, so that affects Sandy at all, so. A lot like the trolley, if you're familiar with Oak Lodge in that area, there's the trolley trail that runs down, so there's a lot of talk about the trolley trail and just how they're gonna connect some of that stuff, so. That's pretty much was the entire meeting. And I recently was asked to and accepted a board president position for the Clackamas County BOAD, which is it's a volunteer organization for disaster management and preparedness, basically. And so it's Clackamas County wide. And a lot of their volunteer organizations are Molalla and Estacada, so I'll be reaching out to some of the organizations here in Sandy. It deals with disaster mitigation, hazard mitigation, in the event of, wildfires or various things. It's organizations, who do you reach out to move animals? Who do you reach out to do this? Who do you get in touch with for that? So if you think of organization that you may know of that's in Clackamas County, shoot me an email and let me know so that I can reach out to them and give them some information. So
Congratulations.
thank you. So that's all I got.
I'll go quick. I got my first Parks and Rec committee meeting in the last couple of weeks. And that's where I was reminded that Rochelle was leaving and moving back to Minnesota. So that was an interesting first meeting, but no real decisions made that meeting, just a discussion about her departure and the takeover interim. And then I also attended a very wet, rainy yappy hour with my dog and my girlfriend. And that was a good time. I love to see even the beer cart. I got a beer and walked around and visited with all the tents. So that was fun. Soaking wet when I got home, but it was okay. And then I would also like to express why I voted no. I'm also a big advocate of supporting community events, but I work in the automotive industry and we have a phrase, and it's called process plus execution equals results. Process wasn't executed here, so there should be no results for that vendor, and it was their ball that got dropped. If we did anything different, I would feel unethical with other businesses. So I really felt like this had to be a no, because we have a process in place that must be followed, even though I support it greatly. Would love to go out there and cheer for him on that day, and I will, like I have the last 2 years, but money, no. We have a process for it that should be followed, and that's why I voted no. I hope he gets involved much earlier in the process so that we can provide that kind of support next season. So that's all I got.
All right, I'm full up, and I have, I went with, Nellie and, Tyler to Salem a week ago Friday, and it went very well. We had 250 people waiting in line to testify, and we were able to get in like the first 40 or so. Everybody had 2 minutes. So I've never talked faster in my life, and I usually talk pretty fast anyway, so. But yeah, we, got some really good feedback from, Representative Drazen about how well we are being perceived by the other folks on the committee. They felt like since we've already got so much skin in the game with raising our utility rates and raising our SDCs, that it's, a lot of the folks coming to them asking for funds hadn't taken those steps yet. And so we are far more skin in the game than any of those folks. We met with Carla and I met with Senator Merkley's aide, Sarah Schmidt, the other day, and she wanted to hear more. We've got a $2 million request from them. The Salem one was for the 14 million. We're asking the feds for $2 million, and she's helping make that happen, as is Representative Dexter. So she seemed, hopeful, but again, it's not. It's a little bit of a chaotic environment up there, and they just can't say for sure how certain it might happen that we get that money. So she did want to go see the new park, and we went over there and took a little tour, and she enjoyed that. I went to the Chamber of Commerce Reach happy hour and talked to some folks, and that was really helpful. The yappy hour, must have been following you around, yeah. So, and I was there for a good long while and got soaking wet, but it was fun to see. I wished it could have had better weather, but we had tons of turnout as it was. And do we know how many people we had?
We haven't got the counts yet, but
Okay.
I can follow up
Yeah.
as soon as we have those.
Everybody I talked to, all the vendors and all, they had 19 vendors. I think the first time they had like 6 or 9 maybe, but they had quite a few. All the city department, not all of them, but most of the city departments were out there too, handing out swag, and so that was great.
Andy was forcing people to take pictures.
Yeah.
Count those pictures.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. We have the Clackamas County Dinner coming up this week, and so I'm hopeful that if you haven't, I don't know if there's still time to sign up, but I'm looking forward to that. The meeting with the PGE, kind of just talk about our priorities, what their interests are. I know they do give out some grants and things like that for different city and different projects that the city might be involved in. Yeah, so I think that I also just want to go on the record and say I'm really supportive of this, Timber Festival. It's really, I love going to the Estacada one. I'm an old timber beast myself. I could show you a picture of me, with about a 65-inch log in the Bull Run that I was worked with some fallers and stuff, local fallers and all. So I love watching those kind of things, and I really do want to support this. I'm really excited. I think I do want to kind of have a process where there's probably going to be some different categories in this as far as when we do put this social service contracts together. I can see that some of these things we want to kind of maybe help the homeless, folks that need food, the community action center type partners versus some of the economic development partners. And I think that we can probably kind of identify a certain amount of money to go to each kind of thing, and then they're not necessarily competing against each other. So I'm hopeful of doing that and getting a hold of all the partners out there that can help us, make our dollars go further and make more of an impact for the community. So thank you very much. Thanks to everybody who came tonight, and I appreciate it.